let me know when I can start.
Oh, that was just a test.
Thank you, President Haynes. You may begin.
I'm sorry, Christina, can you repeat that?
Yes, we're recording and ready.
All right, thank you. So I would like to call the Board of Governors meeting to order this morning, Tuesday, September the 27th, 2022. Our meeting is from 9 to 5. And before the meeting gets started, I'd like our board liaison to review the meeting procedures and protocols.
Good
Christina.
morning. To access the meeting agenda, please visit our website at www.ccco.edu and go to the About Us tab drop-down menu. Select Board of Governors, then Meeting Schedule, Minutes, and Agenda, and click on the blue Agenda hyperlink. In accordance with Bagley-Keene, members of the public wishing to comment on a specific board item or during the public forum may do so one of two ways. In-person attendees shall complete and submit a comment card request available at the board liaison table. Following each item, your name will be called in the order it was received. Virtual attendees shall use the raise hand feature. If you are calling into the meeting, press *9. Following each item, your name will be called and you will be given the ability to address the board. For today's meeting, the order in which public comments will be heard is as follows. We will begin with in-person public comments and conclude each item with virtual public comments. Additionally, today we are joined by ASL interpreters, so we kindly request all presenters to consider speaking at a pace for all to follow along. As a reminder, virtual attendees closed caption is also available. Click the CC icon at the bottom of the screen labeled closed captions to read live captions. This concludes my announcements. President Haynes, would you like me to call the roll?
Yes, please.
Hildegard Aguinaldo. Darius W. Anderson.
Here.
Amy M. Costa.
Here.
Joshua Elizondo.
Here.
Tom Epstein.
Here.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo. Jolena Grande. Here. Pamela Haynes. Kevin Hall.
Here.
Thank you. Kevin Hall. Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis. Jennifer Perry.
Here.
Bill Rawlings.
Here.
Roy Shabasian.
Here.
Valerie Shaw.
Here.
Blas Villalobos. Joseph Williams.
Here.
And I see we just got joined by member Felicia Escobar Carrillo. President Haynes, quorum is established.
Thank you so much. I would ask that board member Grande lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
It is my pleasure, President Haynes. If everyone would like to stand and place their right hand over the heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You're muted, President Haynes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to keep background noise at a low pace. So as many of you know, and some of you don't, I have been in Ghana for the last 2 weeks with a large delegation of community college faculty, staff, presidents from across California. There were more than 300 to be exact, and there were probably another 50 Ghanaians who were in education that joined us. And it's gonna take me a while to really think about what I have learned and my feelings around that. But what I will say, the topic of this particular conference and let me say that this is the most historic conference of its kind that has ever been in sub-Saharan Africa, to be really honest. And what the discussion was really about was how do we encourage, support our African descended students? What are the elements that are needed to do that? And so I think that while we spent all of last week talking about that from early in the morning until late in the evening, we have a lot of work to talk about when we get back. We're going to have an enrollment discussion in one of our items. And one of the issues that we keep on talking about is the loss of Black, in particular, students, and the loss of Black and Brown students. And in past cases, i.e. the recession, we never got those students back. We might have gotten other students back, but we never got, for the most part, Black students, the returning students back. And so I think we have to do more than what we're doing now. And that will require a lot of discussion and a lot of curriculum correction. That's me saying that, and that's others saying that relative to our students. And so I'll leave it at that piece, because I think that I will say more as we go through and talk about all of the things we want to do to keep our students. And we talk about our institutions being institutions that a student will have an experience that's worth them staying for. And I think that the Board of Governors is one of those places to have that conversation, because we're involved in the big picture of community colleges. In any way we can do policy and decision-making and regulation that supports the inclusion and the stabilization and the increase of students of color, wherever they may be, is a conversation worth having. With that said, I will, and the other thing I need to say is that I apologize in advance. My flights were canceled. That's the reason why I'm still in Ghana. Our flight is leaving at 10 o'clock. It's a little after 4 o'clock here, and it's a 3-hour, you have to go through customs. And so I will be leaving about 12 noon your time. My sister and I will be leaving about 12 noon your time, with apologies. But our able vice president, she smiles, she laughs, but she is able, will take over these reins. And I know that she's going to do a wonderful job because she's been doing a wonderful job as VP. So with that said, I'm going to end my report, and I'm going to have our interim Chancellor Gonzalez do the Chancellor's report.
Good morning, President Haynes, Vice President Costa. It's great to see you on Zoom. Here in person, you have Member Epstein, Member Shabazian, Member Elizondo, Member Anderson, and Member Grande. We are expecting 2 more board members to join us. We understand there were some delays in flights. So it's great to see everyone today. Good morning to members of the public, Chancellor's Office staff. I have prepared a lengthy report because I have not seen you in 57 days for technical business. This is your first meeting back for official business. The system has been very busy. And so I want to start off by first thanking all of the colleagues in the system who have invited me and the Chancellor's Office team for meet and greets during this time. It has been 57 days, but over the last 3 weeks specifically, I've been invited to share what this board is committed to, what this interim period means for our system. And I want to thank the SSCCC, the Academic Senate. Thank you, President May. Thank you, Wendy. I see you here today. Our CIO colleagues, the CEO board, and the classified colleagues in the system as well. I want to share with you what I've learned from them just in that short time period of time and those short meet and greets. And this morning, as I was thinking about it, there are really 2 big themes that I found across those meetings. The first is that in the first few years of this vision for success, we used to say that we needed to capture hearts and minds. And as I've talked to these 5 different groups, I wanted to share with you that we have captured those hearts and minds. Our system leaders are not only ready, but they have been doing the hard work. They deeply understand that the American dream is and begins and ends really in terms of a pathway at our colleges. So they are not only more than ready to close achievement gaps, but they are committed. And for me, that's really important to share that with you because I call that optimism, but I also call that hard work. And they have been doing the work and they are ready. The second major theme that I have found across these meetings is that they have been through a period of rapid transformation and they have seen the progress. And that's a really good thing for us as a system. We now have system leaders, and across these groups, we have a community that understands that our colleges have been at the nexus between an economic disruption and a global pandemic. And they deeply understand what has happened to the lives of Californians and the dreams of the students that we serve. And more importantly, what could happen if we don't continue to rapidly transform. They have embraced agility, they have been innovative. And what I'm seeing as a part of this specific theme and what I heard is that it has not only set a foundation for the future of higher education, but for this board, it brings up a really important moment to nurture that transformation and to ensure that it is integrated into the future fabric of this system. So I wanted to share that with you because those were just short meetings, but I'm seeing you have captured the hearts and minds. People have been innovative, and now they are looking to you to really think about that integration and create a foundation for the future of this system. I want to now just focus on really high-level key updates and set the context for your meeting for today. Very important. There has been tremendous progress. You as a board took historic action in the last 12 months in terms of regulations for the system. So you adopted regulations for annual audits, the Chancellor's Office information data request, if you recall. You also adopted an ethnic studies requirement, excuse withdrawals and pass no pass grading options, and your equal employment opportunity regulations. There are a number of other ones, but what I wanted to acknowledge today is that the Department of Finance finally moved forward. And that is a really important milestone for this system. That means that the regulations that you passed here as a board were approved. And now for our office, what that means is the guidance, the technical assistance, the professional development can now be deployed. So we have passed the next step of what it'll take for these transformations to take place. There are two other ones that we are still watching and very hopeful that the Department of Finance will take action. But this is a huge milestone for you as a board and for the Chancellor's Office team to begin to mobilize support for our system. The other big progress that happened just last week was the signing of SB 1141 by Senator Limon. This is the board's sponsored legislation. So you as a board adopted it as a part of your legislative request. The bill has now passed. I won't take Vice Chancellor O'Brien's thunder, but it is a critically important bill. And here's why. This was a critical piece of legislation that really corrects the language that arbitrarily limited community college students from being full-time enrolled. And these are for our AB 540 students. So it technically eventually resulted in our AB 540 students taking more classes, extending their time to completion. And what we were seeing was that students were either deciding not to pursue their education, or they were taking an entire year of non-credit courses in order to meet a 3-year requirement to become an AB 540 student in the state. That has now been removed because of your leadership, because you ran that bill. And that is really exciting for our students and for us to be able to implement the vision for success. I also want to say that we had a lot of help. There were a lot of colleagues, the Student Senate for California Community Colleges, other colleagues here in this room, Immigrants Rising. I believe FAC was very supportive and really helped us get this bill across. And so I want to make sure that we acknowledge everyone that rallied around us to make sure that this bill passed. Of course, want to thank Governor Newsom and Senator Limon for championing this bill. There is another bill that we are keeping an eye on. We do, even this morning, check frequently for AB 1705. As you know, it is a piece of legislation sponsored by Jackie Irwin, Assemblymember Irwin.
It is a bill that we support. It is co-sponsored by Lieutenant Governor Eleni Koulanakis, and it does support the implementation of equitable placement. And that's the work that you as a board, that this system started as a part of AB 705. We have been very supportive. We eagerly await for this bill to be signed because it is a key part of how we're going to address student completion in our system. And so we look forward to providing you an update. If we hear anything by the time we deliver the legislative update, you will hear from Vice Chancellor O'Brien. I also want to make sure that I welcome, while I'm in the good news, sharing good news moment, I want to welcome 2 new colleagues into the Chancellor's office. This is an informational item. It's a part of item 6.6. President Haynes approved 2 interjurisdictional exchange colleagues who are joining us. Professor Kimberly Anderson is joining us from Long Beach City College. Very grateful to Long Beach for lending her expertise.
Recording in progress.
Do we need to check on that? Okay, proceed. So I want to welcome Professor Kimberly Anderson. She's here to really help us deploy that transfer curriculum AB 928 workload, and she started earlier this month. I also want to welcome Eric Cooper, who joins us from Sierra Joint Community College District. He is a visiting assistant vice chancellor. If you recall, we had a vacancy in our research and data unit. He's joining us to develop our longitudinal qualitative analysis projects and research. This is a critical role for our office. And so I want to thank Sierra for lending us that expertise for the next 2 years, and all of you for supporting them as they transition into statewide work, which I know when we talk to all of our IJEs, they appreciate that transition. They learn a lot. And so as much as we are getting from them, I know that they will also learn from us over the next 2 years. Now, let me just shift into your agenda, and then I'm going to close up because we have a very lengthy day today. Today, you have a really important item, as President Haynes mentioned to you. You have an important item on enrollment, persistence, and success. This is not only an important item for this entire system, who has been working incredibly hard during this pandemic, during a historic year of resources, but I think one of the things that we need to keep top of mind today is all of the progress that it took to get here and what it'll take to continue to make progress. Today, you will be joined by a panel of CEOs, district leaders. I want to thank President Galizio from the league, Dr. Christian, Dr. Fierro, Dr. Martinez, and Dr. Miner. These are chancellors from districts who are going to be sharing with you their local action, what they have done during this pandemic, the innovation that they have launched, what they are seeing is working, what is not working. And as we head there, I want you to think about how this work started and what this board, and I know some of you are new, already knew back in 2018. So I am going to take us back. In 2018, I know it seems like a really long time, a lifetime ago, before we had to wear a mask. But in 2018, you as a board really began the work of implementing the vision for success. It was a North Star, it is our North Star. And you courageously supported the student center funding formula. Why? If you were not here, let me share that with you now. Why? Because you were seeing the urgency of having to address what we were already seeing. And you were seeking a way to align funding structures to what you were trying to incentivize, the closure of equity gaps, achievement gaps by regions. And at that time, in 2018, and using data from 2018, you already knew that there were 42 out of 72 districts, now we have 73, but 42 out of 72 districts who were already in declining enrollment. They were already seeking emergency conditions. They were already losing funding. And you as a system, and in partnership with the legislature and the governor at that time, were seeking to really create a funding formula that compelled us to address the full student journey, from enrollment to persistence to success, which is why you see that item have the same language that we started off with. Because what we are seeing today is an opportunity to continue to insist on a rapid transformation and integrate what we already knew, what we have been learning. And that is what this moment provides us with. It's also the reason why you supported and are a part of leading Calbright College. At that time, in 2018, the same year, you also knew that there was a large population of Californians that were not being served by our system. You knew that back then, and you were seeing that in real time. And then, yes, it was also the reason why you supported AB 705 as a board, and you made it a part of the structure of this system. And that bill dismantled the legacy of gatekeeping. Imagine just 10 years before, 85% of community college students were placed into remedial education courses, 85%. This was structural. And so as we listen to this item, I want to remind you of that transformation that you started in 2018. You will hear how credit for prior learning, dual enrollment is now transitioning to really thinking about early college as a tool to get students to their end goal. It's also the reason why you started competency-based education as pilots. And I just sat through an ACCJC committee meeting yesterday, and it was the very first time that ACCJC was seeing CBE pilots be reviewed by their committees. And as I sat in that meeting and colleagues were in awe of what this system was doing, my only message to them was, this is only the beginning. We have been planning for this. We have been getting ready for this. And we all need to be thinking about the structural changes that will support this innovation and the integration at a larger scale. So as you consider this item, it is an informational item. I want you to keep this top of mind and to really listen deeply into the work that you've already started. What our campus leaders need in order to remove the barriers, because that is your role as board members, right? Thinking through what it will take to actually advance these innovations at the local level. So what is it that we need to remove? The second item I want to set into context and make sure that we don't overlook it, right? It's also informational, but really important and aligned to the standing orders that you adopted. You provided the authority to the board president to make sure that there were no delays in approving baccalaureate degree programs for this system. It is informational, but it is a historic item. It's very important that you acknowledge where this journey started. And this started back in 2014. It's really important to know that a bill to remove a pilot took 3 different attempts, right? Baccalaureate degree programs at community colleges are not the norm in this country, and it was not the norm in this state. And it's really important to acknowledge in this informational item what is happening here today with this item. And what is happening is that there were a lot of colleagues in this system, innovators, Constance Carroll, who you heard from at your last meeting, Dr. Miner, who will be here today as a part of your enrollment, persistence, and success item, colleagues who started these pilots back in 2014, entire campuses who have been leading 15 pilots along with faculty, staff, and students, making sure that they are successful. That is what it took to get a bill like AB 927 to get signed. We have a lot more work to do in that area, but I want to acknowledge that when we expanded, when 927 expanded this possibility for this system, here's what it did. It allowed this board to adopt 30 new bachelor's degree programs each year. Today in front of you, you have 2, just 2, but there are 7 more before the end of this year. And what I want to make sure that we acknowledge is that in removing that pilot designation, it was an important shift for this system, a system that you lead, and for the state of California. What is really important to understand with these specific pilots is at a time when 4-year segments have been impacted, are turning away our students who have an associate degree for transfer, a promise, when 4-year partners are creating small entry points to targeted institutions rather than providing broad scale access, you have now, with this action today, created an entire new direct pipeline to baccalaureate degree programs for Californians. That is what you are doing. And before this year is over, there will be 7 more. But these BDP programs are only one more tool. So as you hear this item, I want us to stay focused on what you are creating here. A new tool for California. By the year 2030, I know you've all seen this data point. By 2030, nearly 40% of California's jobs will require a baccalaureate degree at least a baccalaureate degree. This is really important as you consider your vision goals, aligning to the governor's roadmap for the future, and more importantly, how you are thinking about the next steps for this transformation. On June 30th, not only was the pilot designation removed, but aligned with that, what needed to happen was ensuring that our students also had access to more financial aid. And so in this year's budget, you also saw a transformation in the middle class scholarship. Our baccalaureate degree program students do qualify for the middle class scholarship. That is the structural changes that still need to happen, shifting entire structures. But I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of what you have created, the opportunity in front of you to not only adopt new programs, but think through full implementation. Cycle 2 will begin in January. And I can guarantee you that already many people are looking to see what this board does. They are looking to see if this is also a tool that can be used in other states. And for you as a board, it'll be important to note, how then does this affect funding formulas? How does it impact our data collection? How does it then connect back to our own transfer goals? We used to talk about equitable transfer. This work today proves that you're actually creating equitable pathways. And that's the California story about guided pathways. It's just a new chapter. So we are starting a new chapter today. And that is the outlook that I want you to really focus on as you hear Vice Chancellor Lowe and the colleagues that will be presenting that item. I'm going to begin to close and just end with, I debated a lot about including this, but I see Member Williams has the background on. We're here in person, but I want to acknowledge Hispanic Heritage Month, Latino Heritage Month. Many of our colleges are celebrating Latino Heritage Month. For me, it's important that you hear directly from me that this is a part of celebrating diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? It's not just a month. For me, as a Latina, I am a very proud Latina. I celebrate that. But what I wanted to make sure that we said out loud today in the celebration is moments like these, a stage like this, a month like this is about connecting who we are to humanity everywhere else. And I woke up with a really heavy heart thinking about what is happening to many faculty, staff, and students who are DACA in this country. So I cannot celebrate Latino Hispanic Heritage Month without thinking about them today. And I cannot celebrate today without thinking about the women and girls across this entire world in Iran who are fighting for their basic human rights, for a right to an education. And so I wanted to make sure that today I acknowledge and say out loud to my colleagues who are also Latinos in this system, thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your vision, for your leadership. But I want to ask you for one thing today. As you celebrate today and the rest of this month and the rest of your year, I want to call us in to really think about our roots. This is not just an opportunity to think about where we came from. It's an opportunity to elevate our collective outcry for equity, dignity, and respect. And we all have a role to play. So when we are provided a new stage, a title, and yes, even a month to celebrate, it is an opportunity to lift each other up. And the work begins by seeing the humanity in every single person that we interact with. So with that, thank you. Apologies for the very lengthy report.
Thank you, Interim Chancellor Gonzalez. Great preview of the work that we are doing, the work that is ahead of us. With that, we will now go into closed session. Board members, you should have in your email another link to move into that, and that should take about 60 minutes, and then we will convene back into regular session. See you on the other side. And everyone, we're waiting to make certain that we have a quorum to begin. Can I ask who's missing, please?
We have member Epstein and member Grande. And then virtually, we have member Hall. Member Rawlings, who's just joined us.
All right. Just let me know when we have a quorum, please.
Absolutely. Oh,
I'm here.
yes, we're at quorum now.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your patience, and thank you, everyone, for coming back for the general meeting. We have completed closed session, and I should note that the board approved the appointment of the interim deputy chancellor. That was the only action that we took in closed session. There's no other report. So with that, I'm going to try to move through through parts of the agenda by starting with our consent calendar. Is there any item that needs to be removed from the consent? We should note that now. If there's not, then I would need a motion and a second to approve.
Move approval.
We have Williams move approval,
Rawlings?
and Rawlings seconds. Then you can call the roll, please.
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Aye.
Darius Anderson.
Aye.
Amy Costa.
Aye.
Joshua Elizondo.
Aye.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo.
Aye.
Jolina Grande. Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Kevin Hall. Jennifer Perry.
Aye.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Roy Shabasian.
Yes.
Valerie Shaw.
Yes.
Blas Villalobos. Joseph Williams. Member
Yeah.
Grande?
Yes.
Thank you. President Haynes, the motion carries.
Thank you. Let me just note that we've moved only one of the action items forward for approval in this moment, which is 4.2, which is the approval of contracts and grants. We have lead counsel at LaForestier presenting on this item.
Good morning, President Haynes, Vice President Costa, and board members. This item presents a number of contracts for approval by the Board of Governors. I did have a conversation earlier with member Shabazian regarding the item that would award an individual contract to Rancho Santiago Community College District. And he informed me that he would like to recuse himself from consideration of that item. So we're going to consider, I'd like to break this down into 2 votes for approval. One on the bulk of the contracts, excluding the Rancho Santiago item, and then a second vote on the Rancho Santiago item separately. So I can take questions from the board on this item, should there be any.
So do board members have questions on this item? Giving you an opportunity to raise your hand. I don't see any.
You have one hand.
Where? I don't see it. Who is it?
Member
Tom?
Epstein.
Tom. Okay, Tom, please.
Yeah, this is, and our interim chancellor will recognize, this is kind of my my nugget of input. On item 4, the Mesa one, the process of these contracts, I think, are all really good, and goals are provided and achievements are provided, which is something that didn't happen before we had our interim chancellor here. And but in the Mesa one, where it nicely says, how much the improvement was made from year to year, but in the goals section, it doesn't have any numerical goals. It just says improve. And I think ideally we would like to set, how some more specific goals about how much we're trying to improve the progress of these students. I'm not going to reject anything, but just in the future, I think it's important to set goals that we then can measure whether or not we've achieved them.
Okay. Thank you, Member Epstein.
Other questions? Seeing none, then okay, so we are taking with the exception of Rancho Santiago, we are
That's
taking,
Right, that's item 2.
okay, so can I get a motion and a second to approve? Item
Aguinaldo, I'll
one.
move. This is Member
Aguinaldo,
Grande, I'll
yes.
second.
And Grande seconds. Is there any public comment on this?
The public comment period for item 4.2 is now open. We will start with public remarks in Sacramento, then move on to virtual comments. For virtual attendees, please utilize the raise hand feature. If you are calling in, press *9. You will have exactly 2 minutes. I will hand it over to Christina Castro for any public comments in Sacramento.
We have no public comments in Sacramento and I see no hands raised.
Other comments? Are there any written comments of such?
No, President Haynes.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Would you please call the roll?
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Aye.
Darius Anderson.
Yes.
Amy Costa.
Aye.
Joshua Elizondo. Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo.
Aye.
Jolina Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Kevin Hall. Jennifer Perry.
Aye, sorry.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Roy Shabasian.
Yes.
Valerie Shaw.
Yes.
Joseph Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. President Haynes, the motion carries.
Thank you. And then we have item 2 that we will be voting on. That is the contract with Rancho Santiago College.
So moved.
Thank you.
Aguinaldo, I'll second.
All right, and is there any public comment on this particular item?
I do not believe there are any public comments in Sacramento and there are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Then can you call the roll?
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Aye.
Darius Anderson.
Yes.
Amy Costa.
Aye.
Joshua Elizondo.
Aye.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo.
Aye.
Jolina Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Jennifer Perry.
Aye.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Roy Shabasian. Valerie Shaw.
Yes.
Joseph Williams.
Aye.
President Haynes, the motion carries.
Thank you so much. Then the next item is the one that I've been looking forward to, and that's the nomination of the 2023 board officers. And so presenting on this item is General Counsel LaForestier.
Thank you, President Haynes. So the board's procedures and standing orders provide that at the next to last regular meeting of the calendar year, which is this one, the president shall solicit from other board members nominations for president and vice president. The board member may be nominated for more than one office. Additional nominations may be made in writing to the chancellor or from the floor, provided that any such nomination must be made prior to the conduct of the election for the particular office occurring at the last regular meeting of the year. During this first reading, board members may nominate colleagues or themselves for president and vice president. The election of the 2023 board officers will take place at the November 2022 meeting. And at that meeting, the interim chancellor will report any nominations received outside of the September 2022 board meeting. President Haynes.
So I'm going to take any public comment on this item. Are there any hands raised?
The public comment period for item 5.1 is now open. We will start with public remarks in Sacramento, then move on to virtual comments. For virtual attendees, please utilize the raised hand feature. If you are calling in, press *9. You'll have exactly 2 minutes. I will hand it over to Board Liaison Christina Castro for any public comments in Sacramento.
Thank you. We have one public comment, Jamari Robinson.
Go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning, esteemed board members and attendees. My name is Jamari Robinson, and I am the Higher Education Analyst for the California Commission on Asian and Pacific American Affairs. Today, I have the privilege of representing not just CAPIA, but 3 organizations as well: Lead Filipino, Asian Pacific Islander Trustees and Administrators, also known as APITA, and Asian Pacific Americans in Higher Education, APAHI. These 4 organizations are all united in enhancing the educational opportunities for the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and other underserved students, working at the local, statewide, and national level to remove barriers, increase access, and utilize data to showcase the very real variances within the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community in regards to education achievement. Additionally, these 4 organizations are all united in their support of member Hildegard B. Aguinaldo's nomination for vice president for the California Community Colleges Board of Governors. We know that as a 4th-generation Filipina and the first in her family to attain higher education in the United States, member Aguinaldo deeply understands the barriers common to many community college students. And also, member Aguinaldo has a demonstrated track record of advocacy for the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community. This coalition is inspired by member Aguinaldo's longstanding commitment and dedication to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And we believe that the Board of Governors would greatly benefit from her leadership as vice president. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
President Haynes, I'd like to also comment. We received 2 written comments on this item, and they are posted on the agenda.
All right. Now, hopefully that our board members have received them.
Yes, we have public copies at the board members' tables via email and over here for the public as well.
Thank you. So I'm going to read this. This is what I'm going to say. The floor is now open, and I will receive nominations for the offices of president and vice president of the Board of Governors. So please raise your hand if you would like to make a nomination. Usually the board president would tend to make any comments after everyone else has. But if you will allow me to take this liberty as your president, I would much appreciate it. I would very much like to nominate my vice president, Amy Costa. Through good times, bad times, through pandemics, through the call to action, through it all, she has provided sage advice based on her experience and her and willing to be courageous, even when it's uncomfortable to be courageous, even when taking a different position. And I think that's what's actually needed to make for leadership, but also on a board that requires us to really give it our best thinking. So I would like to place a nomination of Amy Costa as the next president of the Board of Governors. Are there any further, the nominations are open, so are there any further nominations for president of the Board of Governors? I don't see any hands raised. I should note that the nominations are open. And I'm not certain of the language around that, but their nominations will continue to be open until the next board meeting. With that, I'm going to close nominations for president, or not, I can't close it, they're open. But I would like to accept nominations for vice president. Oh, I see Vice President Costa's hand raised.
Thank you, President Haynes. There is a quote, if you want something done, ask a busy person. And so under that mantle, I am happy to nominate Board Member Aguinaldo for the position of Vice President. I think the public comments really reflected all of her amazing work. In addition to having a very demanding full-time job, she's taken a leadership role on our board in her work on the DEI task force. And as Pam said, there are good times, there are bad times, and I can think of no one I'd rather share them with outside of our current president than Board Member Aguinaldo.
Thank you for that nomination. Are there any other nominations for vice president? I don't see any hands raised on that. I will stipulate for the record that nominations will continue to be open for both of these positions. So there is an opportunity for others to be nominated. And with that, legal counsel LaForestier, do I need to close with anything other than what I've just said?
Nope, there's no vote today, but if there are other nominations, they would go to the interim chancellor.
Okay, all right, good enough. Then with that item, we are going to move into, we have moved item 6.2. This is the 2021 Enrollment Persistence and Success Update. We have Executive Vice Chancellors Hetz and Alvarado as presenters, and I think they can actually do the introductions of others on this item.
Morning, Chancellor. I can't see online anymore, but Board President Haynes and Vice President Costa, members of the board, we're here to give you a quick update on where things are with enrollment and persistence and success in our system. We have a lot to get through. Some of it's going to be a little bit of a repeat of what we went through at the strategy session. So I'm going to try and go through that quickly to make sure that we have enough time to get to our panel of CEOs who have joined us today here in Sacramento to help share the work that they're doing at their campuses in order to help our system recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. We also have with us today Executive Director Dr. Darla Cooper from the RP Group. She has been helping the system, or they have been helping the system run a system-wide survey of students and what their needs are, both for previously enrolled students and students who've applied but had not yet enrolled. And she will share some of that information with you shortly. Just to let you know, just found out that late last week, we actually completed all of the submissions of enrollment from the system. So all of our colleges have successfully completed their spring submissions. I will have a complete summary to all of you in one of the upcoming board updates. But I won't have that yet because we just got the rest of the colleges in. We had 2 districts that were left. They are all submitted now. So I'm still presenting to you slightly preliminary results, but the results look like they're going to be the same. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to present to you the estimates for the total enrollment decline for student headcount from academic year 1920 to the most recent academic year. That should say 21-22. Apologize for that. We could go to the next slide. And what we've seen across the system is roughly a 16% decline in student headcount. So to put that in numerical terms, amongst the reporting colleges, that accounts for a decline of roughly 350,000 students, down from about 2.15 million students in those colleges to just over 1.8 million. And one of the things that we talked about a great deal is that this decline has not been proportional. So we see significant disproportionate impacts amongst Black and African American students, Filipino students, and Native American and Alaska Native students in particular. If we could go to the next slide. We've also seen disproportionate impact by gender, with male students being more heavily impacted That difference was more significant in the first year of the pandemic, but in the second year of the pandemic, we saw larger impacts for female students, and so that difference has declined a little bit, or the difference between the two of them has declined. Next slide. And then when we look at the impacts by age, one of the things that we've seen across our system is much more significant declines in attendance amongst older adults. Again, that was most extreme in the first year of the pandemic. What we've seen in the subsequent year of the pandemic is greater declines in the middle, they're not really middle age, in the middle of our distribution amongst students age 20 to 24 and age 25 to 34. So their declines have caught up to some extent. So it was very intense impacts on our older adults initially. And what we've seen is the second year of impacts has evened that out a little bit and made it widespread across all of our student ages. Next slide. One of the things it's always worth thinking about is what this has done to our early momentum indicators. So I'm going to show you from our student success metrics cohort view, the first year metrics that help us understand how students are doing. So if we could go to the next slide. And all this does is it takes students' first success rate in their first year, their persistence from their first term to the second term, whether or not they attend full-time in their first term or not, and whether or not they complete transfer level English or math in their first year. And it looks at the progression over the cohorts. And one of the things that you can see here is that despite the pandemic, we have some good news, and that is our success rates and our persistence rates have been maintained. We've been able to help students succeed in their courses. We've been able to continue to get students to persist to their second term. And at the same time, we have improved the outcomes on these very important, strong predictors of students' long-term success, whether or not they attend full-time in their first term, and whether or not they complete a transfer level English or math course, English and math course in their first year. Those are very strong predictors of whether or not students complete a meaningful educational outcome. But this slide also has some hidden bad news in it. And so if we could go to the next slide. So one of the things that's going on here, and that I think hopefully puts the pandemic's impacts in perspective, this just takes success rate and turns it around. So this takes, of all the students that started our courses, how many don't make it to the end, right? So the success rate in the most recent year on the previous graph was, a chart was 71%. So you can see the decline from the start of the class to the end over all our classes is 29%, right? Of the students who started in our class, we lose 29% of them who don't successfully complete the course. And one of the things that you can see here is the pattern of disproportionate impact is very similar. It's most significant on our Black and African American students, as well as our Native American and Alaska Natives and our Pacific Islander students. So it's a very similar pattern. Where of our Black and African American students who started in a course, 41% of them did not successfully complete that course. So that's success rates. This has been happening all the time. If we go to persistence, next slide. So if we think of persistence as the decline enrollment for students who come to the California community colleges to students who come back to the California community colleges in their second term, again, 31% of those students, about a third of our students who started our college don't come back the next term. And again, we see that same pattern of disproportionate impacts where that decline from coming to our college to not coming back is steepest for our Black and African American students, our Native American and Alaska Native students, and our Pacific Islander students. And the thing is, this has been consistent this whole time, right? So what has happened? We have lost these students consistently term after term, year after year. And what has happened, what the pandemic has revealed, right, is that we've constantly been losing students. But what's happened in the pandemic is they have not been replaced by new students. And so what the pandemic has revealed is the ways in which we have not been adequately serving the students that we had and have been relying instead on more students to come behind them. And so this gives us a real opportunity to think carefully about what our colleges are doing to serve our students and make sure not only do they come to college in the first place, but they stay in college and succeed. And so that's a real pivotal point for us to make that shift. And it's been a shift that this board has been working on for some time. It's part and parcel of the vision for success, the student-centered funding formula, guided pathways. All of that work that this board has led has been to shifting our perspective to figuring out not just how to get students to our colleges, but help them succeed in our colleges and beyond. And so just to put a little bit more of an emphasis, if we could go to the completion rates. Next slide. So this is of all students who start with in credit, how many students do we keep until they make it to the end of their academic journey, until they get to any kind of completion, a certificate, a degree, or transfer? We only get 16% of students to one of those outcomes in 3 years. We lose, in some ways, 84% of them. Now, about a third of those students in that 84%, they're still at our college, and about a third of that third, so 10% overall, will get to another outcome within the next 3 years. But that still means a very large percentage of our students who come to our colleges will leave before they ever have a meaningful educational outcome. And again, it's a little bit harder to see here because we have really big floor effects, but there's that same pattern of disproportionate impact. So if we go to the next slide. So one of the things we've been talking about, we talked a little bit about this in the budget workshop with the colleges, is there are different ways to understand how to use evidence to improve student outcomes. And there are two fundamentally evidence-based approach. One of them is very straightforward. It's just to ask students, what do you need? What would help you? And be as direct as possible. And so the other one, before we get to the ask, is to check your work. So one of the things that we're very excited to have happening is we're going to be working with the Wheelhouse organization and PPIC on a nationally funded study of enrollment and persistence in our colleges. And we'll be bringing more information back to you about that over the next 2 or 3 years. We're fantastically excited about the opportunity to bring in additional experts from around the country to help us navigate the best way to understand both what has happened and to take best practices out of that. But so what I want to do now is turn you over to turn the microphone, so to speak, over to Executive Director Dr. Darla Cooper to talk a little bit about the survey that she's been doing of our students.
Thank you, Dr. Head. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share with you the latest information, kind of hot off the presses from our students through this survey. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we're doing this survey, basically what John just said, or what Dr. Hetz just said, about finding out about what are the factors that are affecting students' decisions to come to our colleges and to stay at our colleges. And again, we're trying to just ask them directly, what's going on, what's happening, why are you coming, why are you not coming, what help do you need, what's missing, all of those kinds of questions. And the point of this also is to give information to the colleges as soon as possible. A lot of times with research, you do it at one point and it comes out months later, sometimes years later. But we set this survey up so that colleges have access to the data right now as it is coming in. So a lot of times you wait till the survey closes and then you send out, no, we're giving them the information. Every college has its own link to its own survey results that this entire time that the survey has been open, which as you can see, we started this back in August. It is still open. We've extended the deadline now till October 7th. So we're hopefully that other colleges will continue to get more responses. Right now, as of last week, we are almost at 80,000 students across the entire state. We have at least one response from every single college. You can see the range there is, we have a superstar. We don't want to get anybody in trouble, so we're not going to tell you who that is. But you can see one college has 5,000 responses. Now, is that out of 50,000? Can't tell you, but it's 5,000. So again, lots of responses, but we really do we're extending the survey again to get more responses, to hear from more students, and again, to put that information in the college's hands so they can start to act on it. Let's go to the next slide, please. Again, the survey, there's a lot more to it. I'm just sharing some very, very brief preliminary highlights, but about 25% of the students responding to the survey are either attending or planning to attend more than one college or university concurrently. Right? They're making choices based on whatever is available, what's going on in their lives. Some are doing community college and university, and some are doing more than one community college. Now, again, we surveyed two different groups of students. We have our prospective students. So these are students who filled out an application but had not yet enrolled at their college. And so we asked them, what's going on? What's happening? What's affecting your decision? And not surprisingly, money. They're saying that they cannot afford to go to college at this particular time. They're also not sure which college to go to. What am I doing? I'm trying to figure out, do I want to go to this one? Do I want to go to another one? And then again, things that we've heard before in many surveys, they need to work, or at least they feel that they need to work. They believe they need to work. And that might be because they don't know what their other options might be at the college. Next slide, please. So the other group of students were students who are ours, right? We consider them ours, our previously enrolled students. They've been with us. And we asked them, what is affecting your decision to come back or to not come back? And again, you can see the order is slightly reversed here. These students were more likely to say, I need to work, then say, I can't afford college. And then this one didn't come up for prospective students as high, but this need to prioritize dependent care. And that extends beyond, when you think of childcare, we think of, people's children, but people are caring for their siblings, people are caring for their grandparents, they're caring for other extended family. They are caring for other people, and that is competing for their time and attention. We also asked these previously enrolled students, why are you dropping out? What's affecting your drop? Again, a lot of the same number one, right? With prioritizing work. But this other, here's a note, mental health. They need to prioritize their mental health. They cannot put their time and attention towards school at this time for that reason. And then another group, which again, a lot of these we're going to have to dig into more when we do the full analysis, but that other one, 29% are saying they can't keep up with the pace of the class. You've got to dig into that to figure out what is going on with that. Did want to point out just the little asterisk there you see at the top about the re-enrollment is that 43% have already completed a degree or certificate. Yay.
Of respondents.
Of respondents. That's not a transfer rate. Please don't publicize. And 26% had already transferred. So there, again, it's kind of what Dr. Hess was saying. There's good news in all of this. Next slide, please. So what are our key takeaways? At least so far, what we're gathering from this information is they need more flexibility. They want more flexibility. They're trying to this work-life balance, work-life school balance. They need more help from us to figure out how to do that. College affordability. We need to understand, are students really not able to afford college, or do they think they can't afford college? We've got to figure out and deal with that and other financial concerns that they have. And then we have to look at, I know we can't solve all of these issues, but we have to at least look at what our part is in terms of dependent impact. Next slide, please. So bottom line here, nearly half, so on the survey, we asked students, would you like someone at your college to contact you, and nearly half said yes, please. I'm gonna say it again. It's in bold, it's on one slide. Nearly half are saying, yes, can somebody call me? So they think they want to come. At least that's how I'm interpreting that. And why would you want somebody to call you for you to tell them, no, I'm good. Right? They want our help. We need to reach out to them. So are we going to help them? That's my question to all of us, colleges, everywhere. Last slide, please. So again, if you're there, you're out there, please get your people, you should promote the survey. You have at least over another week till next Friday to get that in. If you have any questions, please contact my esteemed colleague, Michelle White, for more information. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can also contact myself as well. I'm happy to help colleges that haven't started or thinking about ways to get more participation. So that's just jhat@ccco.edu. If we could go to the next slide. So I just want to take a minute to show that this is not unusual. If we could go to the next slide. You see the same types of results in national surveys of students for students who are either thinking about enrolling or have stopped out of education, what's keeping you from it. And the barriers to students' education are the same, right? It's cost, it's life balance. There is stress and anxiety. So the mental health issues is something that is looming very large, probably always, but we talk about it more now than I think we ever did. And then uncertainty over about whether or not this is going to be worth it. Is this going to get me the job that I want? Is this pathway going to work? And then when you ask students, what would help, right? Those are the barriers. What would help you? Well, having a more flexible schedule, being able to get credit for things that I already know, getting the financial aid I need, having more work-based opportunity. And again, you see this, I want to have confidence that this is going to pay off, right? I want to be able to know that this education that I'm undertaking is going to lead someplace. And so if you take all these results together, one of the things we talked about at the strategy session, if we go to the next slide, is the students are giving us a map for what it would take for our system to transform, right? So what are they asking us to do? They're asking us to shift the burdens from them to us so that they can navigate through this successfully, that there's a clear, easy route to where they're trying to go. They would like us to more actively address student basic needs, their mental health needs, and the full cost of attendance. One of the things that Dr. Cooper was mentioning is our system is very affordable compared to lots of systems, but it does not yet account for how much it actually costs to attend fully. Another thing that comes up is students want fair credit for the skills that they have. They get really upset, rightfully, when they're asked to repeat work or when they don't get credit for things that they already know how to do. And really what they're asking us to do, like the big answer behind all of their answers is they want to be confident in the value of the education that they are getting. They want to be able to know how they're going to get where they're going, and they want to know that it has value. And that's really what a lot of their answers come back to. So we are now at the cusp, if we could go to the next slide. We have gone through an unprecedented amount of work through our system. Everyone across the system has been working exceptionally hard at every one of our institutions to try and recover from this pandemic. We have collective strategies that are working to advance student-centered regulations that remove barriers and promote equitable access. We are exceptionally grateful right now to the governor, the legislature, and the federal government for the prodigious resources that we are being given in order to change what's happening on the ground for our students. So we are very excited about that. We have a list of some of those on the next slide. And there's a lot of acronyms here. I could go through all of them, but essentially we've gotten somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 to $5 billion of support. We have a variety of buckets that are for direct support to students. We have a variety of buckets that are for institutional aid. For the purposes of time, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but suffice it to say, we have a lot of resources for helping us navigate our way out of the impacts of the pandemic. Next slide. We also have a variety of state investments. So we have investments in basic needs and mental health. We have statutory changes that also allow use of lottery funds for basic needs as well, increases to our student equity and achievement, the COVID response block grants, and re-engagement enrollment funds. So we have a blend of new ongoing money and one-time money to help us recover. If we go to the next slide. And so we have undergone as a system a lot of critical efforts. We've successfully advocated to remove state barriers around using her funding. We've released a variety of guidance to colleges to outreach to students who took excused withdrawals. We've issued executive orders removing time constraints for grading options, flexible excused withdrawal options, flexible cooperative work experience. We've got guidance on leveraging new state funds and HERF resources to do all kinds of things like peer-to-peer outreach, major focus on populations with the steepest declines, the things that we've been talking about already. We've partnered with college leaders to produce guidance to help understand how to use all these resources. And then we have ongoing statewide professional development, resource tools, webinars, trainings, and workshops that we are trying to provide. And all of that leads us to the final slide for me, which is how do we take all of this to transform, right? So those are the same things as before, but I just want to put it in the context of the work that this board and this system has been undergoing over the last 5 years. So if we could just do the first advancement. Excellent. So what if you think about those first things, shifting the burdens from students to institutions, clear, easy, navigatable rules to completion, that's the work of guided pathways in AB 705. If we could advance to the next one. This is where we're addressing student basic needs, mental health. This is attention to the social determinants framework. You're going to see more about that. There's the basic needs centers, all the emergency aid, the expanded Cal grants, the use of lottery funds. Next, the able to enroll in courses. This is our new block grants where you have the opportunity to explore flexible scheduling. You have CCC OEI here, Title V changes. Next. Getting fair credit for their skills. This, of course, is 8705 and 1705 writ large, but it's also the expansion of credit by exam and credit for prior learning. And it's a big part of our transfer reform, 8928, common course numbering. And then on the last one, that's really what this board has been leading, right? The vision for success, the new roadmap with the governor, the student center funding formula, our efforts towards transfer, all of those things ultimately are about restoring the sense of the value of education in the California community colleges. And so now I'm excited to turn it over to our panel of CEOs and Executive Vice Chancellor Marty Alvarado in order to share the work that they've been doing, taking advantage of all of the resources that we have.
I'm going to invite our CEOs and chancellors to come on up. We'll grab one more chair. Seat of honor on the end. Good morning. It is still morning. As mentioned, I'm Marty Alvarado, Executive Vice Chancellor for the Equitable Student Learning Experience and Impact Office. I am very excited to hear from our panelists, so I will keep my comments brief before I pass it over to our colleague Larry Galizio from the lead. As we begin to engage in this panel, I want to encourage the board to keep in mind the data that we saw, the progress that we've seen, the work that we've established to set the enabling conditions for the work that happens at the local level, and continue to think about as we enter this new fiscal year, what is the work, what is our collective work at the state level going forward that we can advance in order to best support setting the structures, advocacy, enabling conditions for our CEOs as they do the hard work with their teams on campuses to work directly with students, because that is where the magic happens. So with that, I will pass it over to Larry to give us to introduce our panelists and give us a few opening comments.
Yeah, thank you very much, President Haynes, Vice President Acosta, Dr. Gonzalez, members of the board, Larry Galizio, Community College League of California, and Interim Chancellor Gonzalez asked me to talk a little bit about what we're hearing at the League from the 69 districts that are not represented, and then of course I'll turn it over to our colleagues here. So I did provide a slide. I don't know if it's available, but and I want to go really quickly here. Probably the next slide.
Yep.
Another slide.
Next slide, please.
I think Oscar Wilde said, "The suspense is killing me. Don't let it stop." So anyway, I'll just go.
Next slide.
So I'll let you. Okay, thank you. Oh. Wow, this is exciting. So let me just tell you what I'm hearing from some of the districts. So first, cautious optimism that they've hit bottom in terms of enrollment and there's an upward trajectory. However, what I hear is it's going to take years, a couple, 2-3 years, not necessarily to get back to where we were, but just to see a more substantial increase. That's what I'm hearing. Student surveys, focus groups, data-informed labor-intensive outreach, and persistence work are occurring at all of our districts. There's a lot of work going on, and it's hyper-local. So it depends on, and I think this panel will demonstrate that. The work that happened pre-pandemic on financial aid and especially on basic needs is meaningful and continues to be important. So that's really essential. Now, district leadership remains constrained, however, by laws and regulations that prevent investments in personnel and other means to enhance student services and supports. I'm talking about the 50% law, which was passed in 1961. When the data show you that that you need student supports and advising. It's really critical, and you can't make those, and you're constrained because of a very old law. This is a problem. So there remain some constraints in the status quo. While the most recent budget certainly is very powerful, and as we saw on the last slide, that relief is important, but decades of disinvestment prior to that, and also the recent state budget is 70% one-time monies. So there's a lot of concern among CEOs and trustees about the next 2 or 3 years. The pandemic demonstrated really how colleges could effectively adapt to crisis circumstances with the support of this board and the executive orders, and the federal and state resources. Yet again, I think looking at the status quo regulations, regulatory environment, and other obstructions, which hamstring the ability of the individuals that you will hear from very shortly, is something that I think we need to work on. Let me end on some more positive. The student-centered work, such as the Caring Campus Initiative, which the Chancellor's office has supported, is really demonstrating a lot of promise. It's very clear that efforts to establish and maintain human connections with students, that's really key to the enrollment and persistence and student success. So with that, it's really my pleasure to turn it over to 4 district leaders to share the work that they're doing. We'll go in the order that was recommended from the Chancellor's office. Judy Miner from Foothill De Anza, Marvin Martinez from Rancho Santiago, Jose Fierro from Cerritos, and then Sonia Christian from Kern. Chancellor Miner.
I'm going to interrupt real quickly because we do have slides from each of the campuses. So I want to make sure, I think we're going in a slightly different order. I apologize for that. Next slide, please. Dr. Fierro, I believe you are up first with the slides. And what I would say is, as you all are introducing and giving a little bit of background, please share your updates from your campuses and also how you've leveraged, maximized your state investments, really to strengthen that student-centered approach that we heard earlier and that Larry so nicely outlined for us. So with that, please.
Good morning. My name is Jose Fierro, president of Cerritos College and current president of the CEO board for the league, and it's great to be here. So we are basing our enrollment strategy on 4 main points, and at this time we are fluctuating between 4% and 5% up. This last report shows 4% up. I think the week before we were 5, but we're comparing point to point, and we are up to this particular point. We have 4 main strategies, and the first one is called Cerritos Complete, which is our Promise program. However, it is a variation of the traditional Promise programs, because what we try to do is essentially make this program an academic program rather than a scholarship program to waive tuition. So in order for the students to be eligible for this, they have to meet some very specific requirements, and those requirements are centered around creating community on campus, creating support, and essentially making sure that the students are making meaningful progression to graduation by requiring them first to complete math and English on their first year. And I know that is a tough task to ask, but we pair them right away with counselors, with advisors, with tutoring, and we ensure that we keep the momentum as they go through the program. To that program, we can actually see that our students complete more units at the end of the first year, which is an indicator for graduation. 2, we have higher retention, and 3, we have higher graduation rate. This is connected to the return on investment that our students are expecting today when they put the effort to go to college. Today, more than ever, high school graduates and returning adults are questioning whether or not going to college is actually a good choice. We have gone to college and we believe it's a good choice, but when you look at the national surveys, about 35% of the respondents actually believe that going to college, to community college, is a good investment, and we need to change that narrative as we go forward. We also have our learning and career pathways, which is our model for guided pathways. But that model has been layered on top of what we call our 5 momentum points. Our 5 momentum points are encouraging our students to attend 15 units on that first term or 30 on that first year. They need to complete transfer level math and English on their first year. We need to increase the persistence of the students from fall to spring and increase the first time students persisting fall to fall. Why those 5 measures? Because those 5 measures, based on the data that we have collected, are clear indicators of whether or not our students are going to graduate. And what the data is showing us is that the longer our students stay in the system, the less likely they are to graduate, the more likely they are going to drop. There was a say by a different organization many, many years ago that says time is the enemy. And when you look at the data across our system, you see that the longer our students stay, the greater the chance for us to lose them. High schools are graduating fewer students than they did before, which means that it becomes imperative for us to be able to retain and graduate the students we have already in the classroom and to convince returning adults trying to retool to come back and stay in college. The next part is what we call the trifecta of services. First, addressing housing, then food insecurity and transportation. And at Cerritos College, we have done all 3. We open housing on campus, well, across the street, for home insecure and homeless students. And we partnered with a local organization in order to address students who are not able to secure permanent housing. Because it is unreasonable to expect that one student is sleeping in his or her car or in a park bench. It's just unreasonable to expect that they're going to perform well in the classroom. We also address food insecurity by opening the Falcon Nest, which essentially help our students secure resources for food, long-term food, or just to go and shop in our store. It's free of charge, but it's essentially a store and they can have some dignity as they come in and pick up their items. Because again, it's unreasonable to expect that someone is going to be able to perform an algebra problem when they're just super hungry because they haven't eaten in 24 hours, so they don't know what the next meal is going to come from. And the last part we are addressing is transportation, and we been third semester in which we are offering free unsubsidized transportation passes, unlimited rides with LA Metro in our campus to help our students come to campus. As prices are up, and obviously sometimes our students have to make the decision between going to school or putting gas in their car to do something else. So to close, we need to ensure that we provide a good reason as to why going to college is still important, why it's a good investment. We need to move away from asking why you left. Not dig on the survey, but it's just why you left. And I think we kind of know why the students are leaving, and we need to move into how can we get you back? It is like when you're in a relationship and you may not have been the best before the things ended. How can I get you back? And that's the question we should be asking our students. What changes can we make to ensure that you return to campus? And if I make those changes, what are the chances of you coming back? And last part, we need to transition from saying we need to get out of the pandemic and what can we do to get out of the pandemic to how can we redesign our educational system to meet the needs of our current students, the current time, and build that trust again with our students and the public. The enrollment issues that we're having today are not only because of the pandemic. We have been in a decline in our system and across the nation for about 10 years. The pandemic just sped up a process that was coming.
Thank you so much, President Prieto. The next slide, please. Let's go to Chancellor Meyer.
Thank you so much. I want to acknowledge the presence of the President of the Board of Trustees for Foothill De Anza, who's here today, Patrick Aarons, who is also an alumnus of De Anza College. I wanted to begin by saying that we launched the reimagining of Foothill De Anza a year ago, and it was in response to board priorities that were adopted in 2021. And I wanted to share 3 of those with you to set this larger context. One is that we need to develop a shared understanding regarding the need for ongoing institutional change and why it is imperative if we are to eliminate structural racism and achieve our equity and student success goals. We must monitor progress in the student-centered funding formula metrics through substantive board discussions at least twice a year. And we must build budgets that, regardless of fiscal conditions, will increase investments in intentional strategies designed to achieve student success and equity goals and the elimination of systemic racism. So part of our strategy is to clearly articulate in the college and district strategic and equity plans the students we wish to serve, the programs and services that best meet their needs for transfer, employment, and lifelong learning, and the ways we will measure their success and ours. And we will map out the who, what, and when over multiple years. For basic needs, I am so happy to report that the Foothill De Anza Foundation is amplifying the kinds of aid that we have gotten both from the state and from the federal government. We have a 3-year, $3 million campaign called the HOPE Initiative to raise money to support students' food, housing, and mental health needs. For food, we're so grateful that we've had additional state money to expand the food pantry offerings and the hours. And we actually had a donor at De Anza who allowed us to hire a full-time person to staff the food pantry at De Anza. For housing, we made history in Santa Clara County, March 3rd of 2020, passing the largest educational bond in the history of the county, $898 million. And we have earmarked $200 million of that for student and employee housing, looking basically to do partnerships in the community, trying to actually help some of the most expensive areas of the country meet their housing obligations. And we believe that that's really in the interest of our students to be there. For mental health, again, both state and local funding, expanding on-campus mental health services, including increasing staffing and psychological services with some trauma-informed specialists. There is so much that our students bring where we need to help them. And I'm just so pleased with the nature of the conversation that we've heard today. We have also implemented Timely MD, which is a 24/7 mental health telehealth service. And that is just so huge when you think about when students may be in crisis, we're not in our offices. For enrollment management, I just want to make a few comments about the diverse student populations that we aim to increase or attract in areas we may not have done before. Middle college has been a huge success for us, and we're actually doubling that for De Anza College and Foothill College, and that's really by popular demand in our communities. Dual enrollment has increased, and our students in the high schools are actually outperforming some of their counterparts, particularly in communities of color. So we're very excited about that, what that bodes for us in terms of their ultimate continuation with us or other institutions of higher ed. We will be working more with Opportunity Youth. I'm so pleased that both of our colleges will be partnering with Year Up, which has very much focused on attracting African-American and Latinx students with very, very successful rates of employment and really a thriving wage, which is what you need in Silicon Valley. We're looking more at working learners. There are so many, and when I saw the slide that you had about that decrease in the particular age population, we need to definitely pay attention there. We will be working with more incarcerated students and international high school students. We need to use our own district-wide enrollment management to lessen the silos in curriculum, student services, and business processes, and provide more frequent and detailed attention to student equity outcomes. I'm going to try to go very quickly in the career technical education. We're so grateful for the support for the bachelor degree programs. That is huge throughout the state, and thank you for supporting the expansion. Our own new and expanded programs in CTE include semiconductor manufacturing, dental assisting, non-destructive materials testing, autonomous vehicles, design and manufacturing technologies, sustainable building management. And we have partnered with Stanford and the joint venture of Silicon Valley in presenting a concept outline to the National Science Foundation for residential electrification in Silicon Valley. And so I hope I'll be able to report something back to you. Thank you for supporting guided pathways. We're excited about that. They are so congruent with the vision for success. They're data informed. And thank you to the Chancellor's Office for recognizing De Anza College for its work in establishing 6 meta majors that each have a virtual village. And as of last week, we had nearly 18,000 students at De Anza who have signed up for that. So when you talk about the evidence that is there about this kind of pathway, we're incredibly excited. So thank you. I'm sorry I went over about 42 seconds.
Amazing. Next slide, please. Thank you so much, Chancellor Minor. We will pass it to Chancellor Christian.
Well, good morning or good afternoon. So let me start by thanking Chancellor Daisy Gonzalez and Larry Galizio for inviting Kern to be here today. It is a privilege and we don't take it for granted. Let me also recognize one of my bosses, Trustee Nan Gomez Heitzberg, who is on the CCCT board as well. So the slide that you see represents the CEOs of the Kern Community College District. Dr. Databoy from Bakersfield College, Dr. Habib, and Dr. Hancock, I bring you greetings from all of them. I was president of BC prior to becoming the chancellor of the Kern Community College Districts. The communities we serve are poor and predominantly first-generation college going. Our geographic area, as you drive from Sacramento down to Los Angeles, we cover about 25,000 square miles. We touch about 5 counties, Kern, Tulare, Mono Inyo, and a part of San Bernardino, and approximately 40,000 students. My presentation today, we will go beyond enrollments and we'll be looking at access with equity and success with equity by looking at metrics. So on the next slide, there are 4 highlights from Kern. So let me start with the second quadrant that has the title, Basic Enrollments. You will see right away that the focus is on the student-centered funding formula. And at the Kern Community College District, we focus on the 16 metrics and we disaggregate the metrics on racial lines and other factors. So you can see that I'm proud to announce that we have a 15% enrollment growth this fall of 2022 compared to fall of 2021. When you look at the data disaggregated, you will see that our Black student enrollment growth is at 22% compared to the enrollment in fall of 2021. When you look at our Latino students, we have a growth of 15% compared to last fall. So what do we do? To just crystallize into 3 highlights, we've been focusing on our guided pathways pillars. Our recruitment and retention efforts have been targeted and customized. And Chancellor Minor talked about the meta majors. We have our colleges have broken into 6 to 8 meta majors, depending on the college. And we have faculty, and I want to do a shout out to our faculty. Our faculty partnering with our educational advisors and financial aid specialists have been looking at data and contacting students and customizing the support that they need. Strategy number 2 has been work-based learning. We have really expanded the resources. So thank you so much for the resources that the Board of Governors, working with the Chancellor's Office, have brought to our college campuses, including the federal government. We have invested a lot in internships, apprenticeships, and other forms of work-based learning. Finally, in terms of our disaggregated data, we have affinity groups like our Emoja program. If I were to say one thing that has worked miracles for our Black students, it has been our Emoja program, specifically in English and math completion. as well as a MESA program for our STEM students and our Latino students. So moving to the second quadrant, I just have one slide. So moving to the second quadrant, when you look at early college, which is dual enrollment. So in 2015, I was completing my second year as president of Bakersfield College, and AB 288 was passed. If you recall, the legislation on dual enrollment had equity in the center. It was not about our privileged students in high school who knew all about college. AB 288, the fundamental principle of AB 288 was to address the college completion rate for our underprivileged students. And when you look at it on a racial equity lens for the current community college district, it would be our Black students and our Latino students. You will see in this bar graph that there is significant growth in our early college enrollment, 9%. And when you disaggregate the data, you will see, and this is wonderful, that our Black students shows a growth of 64% in enrollments this fall compared to last fall, and 9% for our Latino students. So what have our strategies been? Since 2015, we have moved from just ad hocing dual enrollment classes to focusing on pathways to certificates, pathways to degrees. And the second big piece of work that we did was looking at every 9th grader in the high school. We don't wait for students to get to the 11th grade or to the 12th grade. Every 9th grader, there are two things that happen. One is they have a college ed plan, and we're talking about 55 feeder high schools. And the second piece is to get every 9th grader to complete at least 3 college credits. So by the time they get to the 12th grade, they've completed at least 12 credits, if not an associate's degree. And I was so excited when Chancellor Minor was excited about the baccalaureate degree for community colleges. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know you're going to be approving, fingers crossed, the next set of community college and baccalaureates. So just super excited about that. And thank you, Chancellor Gonzalez and Executive Vice Chancellor for your support for this work. Very quickly, third quadrant is on adult learners. President Piero talked about the declining high school graduation. So we have really shifted our focus also to adult learners, because there are significant adult learners who are underemployed or unemployed. And it is part of our mission to focus on workforce development. And workforce development is part of the guided pathways work that we're doing. So you will see in the bar graphs here that our focus in Kern started in 2018. For early college, we were going in 2015. And for adult learners, we started in 2018. And you can see there's been significant growth in career development college preparation, CDCPs. And if you're wondering, it's one of the metrics in our student-centered funding formula. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The student-centered funding formula has been huge for colleges in the Central Valley. So we've grown our CDCPs, and we are looking at it as on-ramping our adult learners into our guided pathways. So it's not one and done. It is coming out to the pathways, boom, completing the next certificate, and it's all about economic mobility. I'm not going to discuss the triangle there that really talks about the partnerships with our workforce investment boards, our community-based organizations, and our adult schools in this endeavor. I will wrap up by saying in the last quadrant are our success metrics. So it's not about access only, it's equity and success. And we are so, so thankful for the vision of success, our North Star, that really has the momentum points laid out for us. And you will see that Kern, we're doing extremely well in coming back in fall of 2022 in enrollment on those momentum points. So with that, I will turn it back to our Vice Chancellor.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. Appreciate it. Chancellor Martinez.
Good afternoon, everyone. Now I have to follow Sonia. That's going to be hard to do, everybody. Great job. Again, good afternoon, Chancellor Gonzalez and Board President Haynes. and all the board members, and a special shout out to Roy Shabazian, the faculty member at Santa Ana College and former faculty senate president at Santa Ana College. So if you can go to the next slide. So in the next slide, as all of you wanted to find out, is what are some of the strategies that we're using, and you want us to identify 3 to 5 strategies that we believe are working. Just want to let you just quickly that, there isn't a silver bullet. There's not one specific strategy that we can use that we'll say that's going to solve all the problems. Really, the best way to be able to do enrollment management is to identify a number of strategies. So I identify for you some of the strategies that we're using. Before I start talking about all of them, let me tell you about the first one that we implemented. We implemented a plan to have everybody come back to the campus. We were not going to accept to be remote the whole time, to be on campus 2 days a week, to be on campus maybe 3 days a week. We made a plan back in January of 2021 that we wanted everybody to come back. So in fall of 2021, we began to open up the campuses. We began to open up admissions, financial aid, the library, tutoring labs. Why did we do that? Based upon the surveys we were conducting of students. Students were telling us themselves, we want to be back. We don't want to be home. And we serve many students of color, many students who are low income, who they live in 2-bedroom apartments. There's 6, 7 people in those 2-bedroom apartments. A 2-bedroom apartment, everybody, is not a library. It's not a touring area. It's just a 2-bedroom apartment. So, but we made an effort to come back, and that's helped us tremendously. Let me talk quickly about dual enrollment. Just like Sonia, I'm a big advocate of dual enrollment for a couple of major reasons. Number one, you're able to serve the students there. And we know that dual enrollment there's enough research behind it to show that it works. And it's been proven that it really helps students advance, be able to get a good college education, save a lot of money, and be able to be retained. So we know that it works. So here's the challenge to make dual enrollment work. As a president and CEO, you got to get out. You got to leave your ivory tower, and you're going to go out and meet the principals, meet the superintendents, meet the school board members. That's what you have to do to make it work. If you enjoy that, like I do, and like I know Sonia does, it's going to work. And as a result, we're working with some of the, all the K-12 schools in our district, private schools, charter schools. We're working with schools who we weren't working with before. These schools, for example, Mater Dei High School, the Orange County School of the Arts, they're in the top 20 of high schools in the state. We're not working with them. We are working with them right now. And so just wanted to share that with you. And as you can see, it's led to a dramatic increase in our enrollment. We're offering a lot more sections. We're offering serving a lot more students. Santa Ana College also has a middle college high school on the campus where they work with Santa Ana Unified, and they serve about 600 students there on the campus. So no doubt it's been a big strategy for us. Identified some of the funding sources that we're using. In all the strategies, we're using a number of federal, number of state resources in order to make this happen. Quickly going to continuing education. Also, look, continuing education, you have a large, significant adult population out there. We have 2 large adult centers. And that one is called the Centennial Education Center, Santa Ana, and the Orange Education Center in the city of Orange. The Centennial Education Center and the other center in the city of Orange last year served nearly 16,000 students. So what are we doing to get out there? Well, we developed almost a year ago, we started a program online for adult students in career, different career pathways. So why was that successful? Well, the adults didn't enroll in those classes because they were concerned about COVID. They enrolled in those classes because they're working. So prior to COVID, if you're an adult and you enrolled in an adult-ed program, you had to go there face-to-face. Well, that's hard if you're working. If you're working from 8 to 5 and then you have to go at night, how many of us do classes at night? It's hard. You're taking care of a family, taking care of a home. So we began to offer a program where they can take their classes at home for adults because they're working 8 to 5, or sometimes they're doing a graveyard shift. So we made it flexible for them to take courses. So guess what happened? The enrollment in our adult-ed programs, continuing education, dramatically increased. It increased so much that we began to take the market share from our other colleges around us. And how do we know that? Because we survey this. We ask them, why are you here? Well, you offer a program that we can take in the evening, or we can enroll anytime and we could we could sign up to the classes anytime that we need. So anyway, just wanted to, and you have some statistics there to let you know how much it's increased. Because if you're wondering why our online program is bigger than face-to-face, it's because the adults, for them, it's much more convenient to take a class online because they are working, don't have time to come to a class. Cash for credit. So, here's the holy grail for us in education. We know that 80% of our students are part-time and 20% of our students are full-time. So how do we get the part-time students to be full-time students? That's the holy grail. How do we make that happen? And many of us have made different attempts. We created a program called Cash for Credit by using HERF funds. And basically what this is that if you're a student and you're taking one class, we tell the student, by the way, if you take another 3-unit class, we'll give you $50 per unit and we'll pay you $150 for that class. So as we saw clearly in all the data that we're looking at, the college affordability is a huge issue for many people. So if you can give them the resources they need, they will come back and they'll take more classes. So as you can see from the data there, for students who, by the way, we've given out nearly 7,000 checks. So for the students who enrolled in the Cash for Credit, they are taking now 10.7 units. So what does that mean? Most of our classes are at least 3 units. Our STEM classes are 5 units, but most of our classes are 3 units. So 10.7, they're taking now, instead of 1 class, they're taking 3 classes. The students who are the non-Cash for Credit students, the ones who are not taking those checks, they're averaging still 3.5 classes, the 3.5 units per for the semester, which means that they're only taking 1 class. They're still part-time. So we need to make an effort to help those students that are part-time become full-time. I don't want to go over the data and the probability that I'm sure all of you know that if you are in part-time, the probability that you're going to graduate is minimal. The probability that you're going to be retained is minimal. I mean, we know that, but I wanted to, again, just provide you that information and it's working for us. And we started the pilot program in Santa Ana College. Now we're going to apply to other campuses called Santiago College. Last but not least, because I see Marty looking at me, is, customer service. Wow, how about that? So what does customer service means for us? That means we're treating students really nice. We're being much more polite. We're welcoming them. So we've done a few things. One is we started what we call an in-call service, 24-hour service where we call students. And if they make contact with us, we let them know that we're here. We connect with them via text. We connect them via phone calls. We connect with them in any way that we can so they can enroll in more classes or they can take advantage of the resources that we have here. We have so many students that have told us that, they called us and 2 minutes later, we called them back. 2 minutes later, they got a phone call back from one of our colleges and that made such a big difference for them. But anyway, as the next slide just real quickly. So, you wanted us to show you on the next slide, just again, just real quickly, how we've grown. So overall, as a district credit, we're up 6.78 right now compared to the fall of 2021, non-credit 4.40. And as a district, we're up 6.36. Lastly, Santa Ana College is just blowing it out. They're up 8.6% and a positive. They expect to end the semester at 12% above cap. Santiago College, they're about 3.4%. They expect to end at about 5% by the end of the semester. Whew, that's it.
Thank you. I know we want to get to questions, so just want to highlight as we wrap up the panel, a couple of, or say 3 key takeaways that I at least heard in all of this. The holistic and integrated solutions that really require trust and relationships, right? And I think that really goes back to the conversation that we heard earlier from Dr. Hetz and Dr. Cooper around listening to the students, asking them what they want and building that relationship. I loved President Fierro's comment, we might not have been the best partner at the beginning, but there's always time to turn it around. And these are relationships, right? I also heard that we are now moving into spaces where we are really centering activities, efforts, programs, and populations that have historically been marginalized, whether we think about that as returning adults and career tech ed or dual enrollment. Those have been things that our campuses have been investing in for years, decades, but they have typically been at the margins. And as we really focus on centering and getting those students across the finish line and mapping the pathways, is what I heard. Really going to require, I think, to Larry's excellent point, around the structural, revisiting structures, and do our structures facilitate scaling and maximizing support for these students. The last thing I heard was really building for resiliency and those structural investments. It requires a workforce to call those students and respond. It requires a workforce and investments to invest in housing. And so the structural components are really core as our institutions think about not just the gains you've seen here, that each of them have showed the demonstrated outcome, but also the long-term impact of continued growth and stability. So with that, I would just end with, as was said, no silver bullet, but it is taking action one step at a time and leveraging the resources and investments that have been made. So thank you all. Pass it back to, I think, Vice President Costin, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you, Marty. Pam sends her regards to everyone. She has a travel day today, so she's not able to join us for the rest of the meeting, but thank you to the panelists, very informative presentations. I would like to deputize one of my colleagues in room in Sacramento as we move to board comments to help direct traffic there, because you all look like ants to me. So how about board member Aguinaldo? Do you want to kind of direct the traffic in room, and then we'll move to the colleagues that are participating virtually?
It's my pleasure. Do we just ask for public comment?
Board comment first,
Board
and then
comment
we'll move to
first.
public comment.
Clearly, I need the practice. Does any of our board members in the room? Or any board member comment?
Sure. I had a question, and thank you all. That was really wonderful, and love the data. In the area of mental health, because on one of the surveys, it was interesting to me, that 2 of the categories dealt with anxiety and then, self-doubt. What are you seeing at the campus level, and what are you doing specifically to go ahead and deal with those issues of mental health?
In our case, we have a school psychologist, and we created an intern program. So essentially, we have expanded our on-campus psychological services and contracted out to be able to offer services 24/7. However, aside of the formal services, we have integrated a number of practices that are based on entire wellness. So we encourage our students to take part of meditation groups, yoga classes. We bring goats, we bring puppies, and so on, because essentially that has been shown to actually help one reduce that type of effect. And those that engage in meditation practices and mindfulness seem to do better over time. So we have multiple strategies on campus besides the traditional professional services that we're engaging on, and our director of our clinic is very involved in the mindfulness process, and we have a number of students and staff actually to take part of these practices.
I might mention too that in addition to the professionals who are providing psychological services and in our counseling area, we're trying to provide more professional development for all of our employees in recognizing the signs of distressed and disruptive students. We actually had a very well-attended session. We just started back to school on the border system, so I don't have an enrollment update for you today. But that's been really important that we are all aware. The other thing that I'm very proud about, we have a full-time trainer for our police department because we have our own sworn officers. And so they are being trained in de-escalation procedures. And there is a really close working relationship that they have with our student services area, so that people are not quick to jump to call the police necessarily, but if there is, they know how to be safe. And so just doing more of that and just really enhancing the community policing ethic of our group. And I've been very proud that our police chief has, turned down candidates that don't fit the mold of who shares our values and can really create a safe place for our students. And we know how difficult that has been in recent years. So I think that's another really important part of the issue of creating safe spaces on campus.
just going to jump in as well. Really happy you asked the question because the community is also relying on the community colleges to provide healthcare workers. I mean, it's just exploding. The need for healthcare workers is exploding. So we're responding with those non-credit certificates that I mentioned that is tagged onto like a CNA or an LVN, or for our psychology classes to get those healthcare workers to support our psych tech program. So it is a need that is growing.
Just one more thing, Tan. Obviously, there's funding that came from the legislature. I certainly would see that we need to advocate for more. I would love to tell you that by June 30th of next year, we're going to resolve all the mental health issues for all of our students. That's not what's going to happen. So the funding becomes critical. And when there's not enough funding, guess what we have to use? We have to use our general fund. And our general fund is meant for the purpose of offering more classes, generating more FTS. So something has to give. So, anything that we can do together in partnership to go to the legislature and say, this is important. This is really important and we need your help so we can address all the problems that we're seeing all the time, every day.
Tom has a question, then I'll follow Tom, and then I see that we have to pass it back virtually for Jennifer's question.
Okay, first of all, I just want to thank you all for coming in here in person. It's been a few years since I've seen most of you, and it's great to see everybody here. I want to thank your trustees for also joining us today. And I thought all of your presentations were really interesting, and I kind of wish we had half a day to get deeper into this with all of you. But the one question that has been on my mind for quite a while is, post-COVID, what is the role of online versus in-person classes, and how can that balance be used to maximize student achievement, the ability, their access and achievement, and also how, and complementary to that is how do we make sure that these online classes that are being offered are using the best teaching practices, the best technology, and students have access to that. Any of you who are kind of engaged in that, or all of you, I'd be curious to hear how you're dealing with that issue.
I wouldn't mind speaking up a little bit for CCC OEI since we're the sponsor at Foothill De Anza, and I think they're doing a really good job in assessing the efficacy of our pedagogy. And this is really important because we all had to pivot so quickly. Faculty were not necessarily trained in how to do this. And so it was one thing to say you can put Canvas up for everybody. I think that's definitely important. What I'm finding for Foothill De Anza students, there's a great deal of interest in online classes, but in-person services. And so we're trying to respond to that, even though we do have more in-person classes that are going on. But, like what Marvin was saying about the need for some of those online for individuals who can't come to us, because also we can offer things asynchronously. And so it isn't necessarily about having to be at a set time. So I think we're going to find hybrid will really emerge as kind of the most effective way of going forward. And that we have to constantly assess that, because you can't assume that just because certain disciplines and certain populations work, we have to be constantly assessing, are we paying attention to our student needs? So going back to what Dr. had said, and Dr. Cooper, we have to ask them, so what's working, and to really measure all of that.
Good to see you once again, board member Epstein. The first thing I want to say is that I think that the online education is here to stay. So again, let's go back to before COVID. Before COVID, I would say most of our campuses, maybe 10% of our courses were online and 90% were face-to-face. That obviously has changed dramatically. And when it happened, I think many of us began to identify various uses of it. So we're seeing that it's really helpful. As Judy just mentioned, as it relates to adult students, we didn't think that it would be as helpful, but it is. They have taken full advantage of online classes. It's also helpful for a number of our students who are still fearful of coming to the campus, and they're still fearful that they will be infected by COVID. And it's also been effective with our counseling. A lot of our counselors have done and provide counseling services It's really helpful for mental health services we were talking about earlier, where students feel more comfortable, talking to someone online. So again, it's here to stay, and I think we're beginning to identify better ways to use it. We're becoming much more strategic in terms of how we use it, but it's definitely here to stay.
I think it's important to recognize Chancellor Martinez has said is here to stay, but most importantly, to begin moving from offering classes online to offering programs online. Offering a class online gives one the access to that class, but not the possibility of completion. And over the years, we have done just that, offer classes, and now many colleges offer full programs that are online with clear pathways for our students to go through. And the pandemic is showing us that that is needed and that we are reaching an audience that we did not address before, as those working adults or returning adults that are prioritizing work over going to college in person. The other part that we need to do is ensure that we're able to provide students with the same level of services that we provide them on campus online, no one or the other, but both, which essentially require us to make more strategic investments as we move forward. And last but not least, we need to make sure we support our faculty on the development of those programs and in the technical assistance that is needed, because as Chancellor Miner mentioned, many of our faculty were perfectly happy teaching in the classroom and incredibly effective. And then now we have to switch, and our students are switching, and they have different preferences, just like this meeting that is happening right now. I don't even know where to look since there's so many people everywhere. There is the same thing for our students. They have the same level of expectations today, but we cannot just simply put the burden on faculty without the support needed to develop top-notch courses as we move forward. We need to remember that they are subject area experts on mathematics or biology or English, not necessarily on instructional design or technology, and that is something that we need to prioritize as we move forward.
My value-added comment is this idea of social capital and social intelligence, which really is not an explicit part of the curriculum, but it's necessary for students to be able to compete when they get into the workplace. There is a conversation that with online education, could that be lost, and how do we build this into pedagogy so that that becomes part of, very intentionally cultivating that confidence, because it's an equity issue. Because the students who can, do well are students who probably their parents know how to navigate these complex environments, but those who don't have that experience get shortchanged. So that, social capital and social intelligence is something we're grappling with as well.
Thank you very much. I have a question and then I'll pass it to our virtual folks. So Dr. Hetz was talking about reassessing a value proposition. And I'd like to know, given your incredible gains and especially getting students of color back into their campuses, how being at this stage has allowed you to reassess a value proposition, how you're selling the value of a community college education to the students.
I would say that the vision for success that was done many years ago is true today, as it has been for several years. And at least for colleagues at Kern, what we're recognizing is what the pandemic brought to light were issues of equity and diversity that are already embedded in the vision for success. So, when Dr. Hetz was showing the data, my goodness, Dr. Hetz is really brilliant. But I knew the guy when he started working on the multiple measures that led to AB 705. And so when he was looking at sort of those doom and gloom bar charts with everything like in the negative, it was like, oh my goodness. And it was eye-opening. But what I would say, looking at it from the bright side, is the Board of Governors put out the roadmap for us years ago. And we're just getting more intelligent through the pandemic in how we can use new tools to tackle these problems. So it's a recommitment to something that was already done by you and provided to us.
So I think that the question that you raised really it's really critical, because it's not just about recruiting students and enrolling. It's about how do we utilize all those tools in order to diversify our campuses. So why is a program like Do Enrollment so significant? Well, how many of you have you been to a high school lately and been into the classrooms? When you go into the classrooms, it's all people of color. That's who you find in the classrooms. And many of those individuals, unfortunately, will not make it to our doorstep. But we can meet them halfway by getting them involved in Do Enrollment. And we know that with the appropriate support and services, they will succeed. We have many students who are graduating with not only a high school diploma, but an AA degree when they're in 12th grade. We know that it works and we know it can happen. This is something that I believe most colleges eventually will have to do, because number one, it's a great way again to continue to diversify your student body. It's a great way to serve those students that will probably never make it to us unless we go to them. It's also a great way for those students who are low income, who can't afford a textbook, can't pay for the classes, so it's working really successfully for us. Lastly, in regards to retention, I think if you do enrollment correctly, it will help you with retention. Those retention rates will increase, and we'll have more likely that these students of color, will not be at the bottom of the ladder of that, like they've been historically for us, specifically Latino and African American students. Through a program like this, we believe that we can increase their retention rates and not be at the bottom all the time. So again, I think, it brings so much value, and I couldn't say more, to support a program like Do Enrollment. So thank you for all your efforts, by the way, 288, everything that you're doing. I mean, it's so helpful, all these tools you've given to us.
We've made much more of an effort in reaching out to business and industry in a sense to provide that kind of visibility in the community. Being in Silicon Valley, so many of the companies that may have an international footprint would look at baccalaureate granting institutions. But the reality around, their need over the years for H-1B visas, the shortage of labor really has put community colleges in the spotlight, that they need us not only for the persons to be there, but the diversity of the workforce that they typically would not get from other institutions in the area. So we have this spotlight that we really are, I think, taking advantage of. And, I breeze through some of the career technical education areas that I'm telling you about, but it's coming from industry who are saying, if you do this, the partnership we had with Amazon Web Services. And I was actually thinking about one of the slides about students leaving without degrees. Some of our students are being snapped up after a single course, because then a place like Amazon, where they may be able to get for the foundation in the web services and the client services they can do, they may come back later. But right now, so many of our students are focusing on jobs. And so however quickly we can get them out there in the community. And I'm really proud of our faculty in the career technical areas who have thought about non-credit pathways and shorter pathways. Our faculty at De Anza convinced the Department of Real Estate to accept non-credit real estate courses. We granted 70 certificates in spring quarter. That was the first time they could offer those that be accepted. They are estimating we will give 200 certificates this year. So think about that. And again, no cost. They don't have, even in terms of the qualifications to teach a credit course versus non-credit, also means we can go into the community and probably get more people who are representative of the students we're trying to serve. There are a lot of kind of unintended consequences when we do some of these things. Dental assisting used to be only a full-time program. And how many of our students could leave their jobs I'm so proud again, the faculty members said, I bet we could get more students and a more diverse population if we made it part-time. So that program can be completed now in 2 years instead of 1. Classes are Friday and Saturday. And the other plus, because it's an apprenticeship program, the students get paid for their clinical experience, which is not the case for a full-time student. And our faculty got grant money from one of the dental associations to pay for everything for our students. And the diversity both in age and ethnicity is very pronounced as we see that. And the students will immediately get jobs because that is a very, very important area. And I laughed when we actually did a presentation statewide for the Chancellor's office. And there were people from a number of Bay Area counties, and somebody from Santa Cruz said, I can hire 19 people if you could give me 19 people right now. And somebody from Santa Clara County said, excuse us, but Foothills our college. And I just thought, it was so great, to hear this kind of ownership of our students. And I think we can all tell stories like that about the innovations that are coming in, because we have to do it. It's about the enrollments, it's about the flexibility. And so we have heard and we're responding.
I look at value in a slightly different way if I was a student trying to go back to college. And the way I do it is across the street of my campus, I have an In-N-Out. They were hired at $25 an hour. And some of them were giving signing bonuses. So you think about if I go to In-N-Out and I make $25 an hour out of high school, do I have a program that I can graduate as a student to make more than $25 an hour after they finish my program? The answer may be yes, maybe not, but then I have to look at a different way of adding value. And the first one is, how could I allow the student to still earn those $25 an hour when at the same time they come to my college? So that requires a different level of delivery of classes, whether they are hybrid, high flex, online, or whatever other method that work for them that allows them to attain their education and still earn those $25. Then I need to make sure that if In-N-Out wants to hire them full-time, I find a way to support them through that hire without losing them as a student. And the next part of that, I need to make sure that my programs are aligned to the job market. And when they finish, they can actually get a job that pays hopefully better than the $25 an hour and allow them still to transfer, because the value of that education is long-term gain rather than the short-term gain. But when we are 25, 19, 20, we want the $25 an hour in my pocket now, particularly if I'm helping my family pay the rent and bills and so on. So those $50 that I can make 10 years from now, they seem very far away. So I need to balance the two. The last thing that we need to do to add value is valuing the time of the students. They come to get a degree, and they come to get it within a reasonable amount of time. 100% of the time is 2 years, no 4. 100% of the time is 2 years, no 4. 150% of the time is 3 years, no 6. 200 is 4, no 8. So we need to stop calculating degrees, associate degrees, on increments of 3, 6, and 8 years. That is not valuing the student time, and that is telling them, yes, go ahead and get those $25 and take a class with us. And that is not what we want going forward.
Thank you. Vice President Costa, back to you.
Great, thank you. Virtually, we're going to go to Board Member Perry, and we'll follow that up with Board Member Williams.
Thank you all. This has been so interesting, and I like to see that the themes that were brought up by the student survey, you've intuitively adapted to without even hearing from the survey. I mean, affordability and flexibility, and looking at the students holistically, and value. And so I think my question to you is, we need at the broader level to look at our communication strategy clearly, because if you build it, they will come, but if you tell them about it, they'll come that much faster. So as people who are directly in contact with the students, I'd really like to hear from you as we're looking at a broader communication strategy, what we should be emphasizing. And again, I think you've hit on it. One of the predominant ones being value, but I'd really be curious to know, because I think an important part of this is retooling and recrafting how we're thinking about communicating what we do to our students. Pandemic, part of it, but the broader issues facing many of these students at this juncture is really part and parcel of it. Again, mental illness being one of the ones, and you've touched on all of them, but is there anything thematically, since we'll be at the broader level, you think we should focus on? And I'm going to turn my video off for a sec because I got to go plug my computer in. I'm not listening to your response. I just want a question simply to hear myself speak.
Gosh, well, so you were asking about it thematically. I think there's a need for creating a sense of community. I think some of the most successful strategies have been the learning communities. And to me, our villages are learning, our virtual villages for the guided pathways are really kind of like learning communities on steroids. We've had 300 participants in our faculty, staff, and administrators who participated in building, if you will, the content to attract students to come into it. And I was so struck by, we probably had about 12,000 students in fall of 2021 who had first come into the communities. And this mattered so much in, as they were watching people connect over Zoom, this was really important. And so to the extent that we can really point out, students are never alone. And it isn't just about in the classroom with peers who understand their experiences. I think we have all hired so many people with lived experience who can represent that to the students. They will see themselves reflected more and more in our administration, in our faculty, in our classified professionals, in each other. And what we have lost because of the lack of the personal contact, because of Zoom and all of that, I'm just seeing, coming back. As a Latina Pacific Islander, as a president of Foothill College or chancellor of Foothill De Anza, students who will come up to me, I don't necessarily know them, but they'll just say, it's just so nice to know that somebody who looks like me could be in a position like this. And I think we underestimate that kind of bonding that can go on. And so making that message clear and to really deliver on that. And I guess I'll use this moment to go back to something Larry Galizio said about the structures and what we pay for and what we require the colleges to offer. The 50% law is not letting us hire into those areas that will best serve our students. And it can actually be faculty who are performing different roles than just being in the classroom. So where they are as mentors, as advisors, as fundraisers, we really need to think differently about the work that we do, because the world has totally changed and it's going to be a while for us to catch up. So that'd be one thing I'd want to say.
Two things. The first one, I think we need to give the students the same courtesies that we're asking to be given to us. The flexibilities that we're asking as employees, we should give those flexibilities to the students as well. The courtesies that we ask when we have difficulties making it to a meeting or submitting a project on time, those flexibilities should be extended to the students too, because the pandemic and the new conditions are impacting them in the same exact way that they're impacting us, but somehow we tend to draw a hard line on flexibilities for the students, and we shouldn't. It's the same. And the last, we need to move from students are not ready for college to, are the colleges ready for these students? They are graduating and they are coming to our colleges the way they are, and we need to accept that and find a way to work with them to get them to the finish line. I think it's unacceptable for us to say that they're not ready. What are we gonna do? Send them back? And we just can't. So we just simply need to come to the conclusion that this is the way our students are coming to us, and our institutions are meant to receive them and serve them in the best possible way where they are. And part of our job is to get them to where they need to be in the future.
So I'm very conscious of the time because of lunch and, but I want to celebrate the Chancellor's office and the work that is happening in terms of, responding to students. When you think of our students, and it's not a monolithic group, the levers that we have been given as CEOs at our colleges, it's recognizing credit for prior learning. That is a lever that the Chancellor's office is moving. Non-credit on-ramps for adult learners, that is another lever. So the way we are doing college now from the community colleges, it's crazy good because there's about 10 or 15 different ways, like small nodes and network we're creating to be able to, in a microwave, respond and customize our, getting students to come back to college. So I just wanted to take the time. In fact, Chancellor Gonzalez, you recently did a I Can Go to College, kind of a campaign. All of that coming together is what is going to light up and continue to get students to come to college with equity. So it's not one type of students, all types of students. So it's something we need to celebrate what the Chancellor's office is doing.
So let me just add that, usually when we run into economic times that are difficult, what's the first thing that we cut from our budgets? Guess what? It's communications, public affairs, and we lose our ability to communicate. That's the first thing that we cut. We're about to come up with another difficult economic time. All of us are seeing it coming. Hopefully that's not what happens again. Hopefully we are able to communicate again effectively, and we don't cut that part of our fund. Last year, our colleges served an additional 6,000 students, more than the semester in the year before. To give you some perspective, 6,000 students, I don't know if you've ever been to like Midwest states like Iowa, and there's cities that have 6,000 people, right? So just to give you some perspective. So how did we do that? There was a number of things that we did. So, probably one of the best things that we did, we just recently did this, we had this event called Family Night, really patterned after open house. My kids just finished high school, and when you go to high schools, they have open houses and you go there and everybody shows up, there's food, there's the tea, everyone's there. We did it in a very similar fashion. I talked to a lot of families and I asked them, hey, great to see you here. So where do you live? And they go, I live like 2 blocks from the campus. And I goes, how long have you been living in Santa Ana? Oh, like 10 years. I go, is this your first time in the college? Their response to me was, yes. So I asked them, well, why haven't you been here to the campus? The response to me was, you haven't invited us. You haven't asked us to come. So that was their way of saying, please have some more events on the campus so we can come and see you. Please invite us in a much more formal way. So that is something that we don't do very well as community colleges. We don't do a good job of earning that enrollment. So what does that mean? That means that if you live across the street from a campus, it doesn't mean that you're going to go to that college. You have options today. You have a lot of options. So how do you earn that enrollment so that person comes to you? So, again, this is where communications comes in. So I think, again, it's a great question. Hopefully, through your advocacy and through Chancellor Gonzalez, we can let all the campuses know, don't cut that part of your budget, that you're cutting off, a really vital aspect of what you can do.
Thank you. I see a theme here. Ask not what you can do for your college, but ask what your college can do for you.
Thank you, Board Member Perry. Board Member Williams, I saw you lowered your hand. Did you still want to address the panel?
I didn't want to stand in the way of lunch.
Smart man, smart man. I know we're a little bit over, but I do want to thank the panelists because I think this is really the issue for all of us right now. And I know on behalf of my board members, we've all been wanting to hear what's happening at the local level. I think Larry said it best. I know these efforts are hyper localized. I do have one last question, and I think it's implied in many of your comments, but Dr. Het said, we just need to ask students what they need. But there's also a lot of stigma associated with some of the issues that we've raised. And I know we sent out a survey, but I'm curious, is that the right way to ask? How do we ask in a way that is respectful and that allows students to be open with us about the challenges they face?
We've had some leadership from our student bodies asking the questions of each other, and I think that has involved more frank conversations. And so maybe some smaller focus groups that can do some deeper dives. I think it's the surveys and, so it's not even said again, like anything, there's no one right answer.
I will say to look at behavioral data, what we have learned based on the campus surveys that we have sent is that the students are giving us an answer, but their behavior is different, meaning we want to do X, so we go ahead and do it, and we notice what they do is either drastically different or is slightly different than what they stated in the survey. So I think the survey plus the preference data of the actual action will be very helpful to begin tailoring future changes at the colleges and the state.
Great. With that, is there any public comment that we need to take?
The public comment period for item 6.2 is now open. We will start with public remarks in Sacramento, then move on to virtual comments. For virtual attendees, please utilize the raised hand feature. If you're calling in, press *9. You'll have exactly 2 minutes. I will hand it over to Christina for any public comments in Sacramento.
Thank you. We have no public comments in Sacramento, and I see no hands raised on Zoom.
I think that Dr. Gonzalez wants to.
Oh, we have one hand raised.
Thank you, Vice President Costa. If I may, just as we head off to lunch, I just wanted to say thank you to our CEOs who are here, who took the time to travel to Sacramento. I want to thank Dr. Galicio and Dr. Fierro and Dr. Christian for joining me for our statewide CEO roundtable. So the work that you saw here today is the work that will continue. This was a really important item to showcase the hard work. So please thank your teams on behalf of the Chancellor's Office, the Board of Governors. And I think the last thing I'll just mention here is that the innovation that you have led during this pandemic, we know was enabled through your hearts. We talked a lot about in the first few years of the Vision for Success, your hearts and minds, but of course, the knowledge that you come with serving the system for many years. So thank you for choosing to serve this system, for choosing to serve our students. We know you have your own surveys locally. You now have a new tool, and we look forward to continuing the work with all of you. I did have one rapid fire question that I wanted to ask you as we close up this item. Our board will have the opportunity to vote on their 23-24 system budget request. And I heard the word 50% law come up, but just one, what is that one program we need to expand, protect, or a structural barrier that we need to remove? Because that is the role of this board. So for you to continue to advance student success, increase enrollment, what is that one either investment or structural change? I'm going to start with Dr. Fierro.
Support for alternative methods of delivery in the ongoing basis, not just one time.
Thank you.
Block grants that allow local decision-making, because we are all so different.
I would say a service as simple as tutoring. Tutoring is so valuable for our students, and it's a must, specifically as we serve more low-income students who are coming to us with lack of preparation and academic skills. We need to be able to serve them a whole lot better, and tutoring is a huge aspect of that.
Just base allocation with flexibility, and also supporting the Chancellor's Office, like the work Marty and John are doing to support all of the colleges.
Thank you. Thank you. Back to you, Vice President Costa.
Thank you. Pam's only been gone an hour and we're totally off the train tracks here, you guys. So I'm going to suggest that we break for 20 minutes for lunch, and I am going to ask my colleagues to be prompt in your return because we have action items, and so we'll need to establish a quorum. So let's break for 20 minutes, which will have us back around 1:16 or so.
One moment, Vice President Costa. We have one hand raised virtually that would like to make a comment from you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Christina.
Lanny Davis, you have control of your mic and can address the board.
Yes, thank you. Can you all hear me? Lanny Davis?
Yes, we can.
I would respectfully, always having been told if I'm about to make a speech that don't stand between me and people having dinner or lunch, that I do not want to delay you having lunch, but I would respectfully ask you, I'm an attorney back east in Washington. I have 2 clients in California who would like an opportunity to speak. And if you will permit us to speak after you return from lunch, it's about a very important issue that I do not believe the Board of Governors is aware of, but I don't want to delay your going to.
Mr. Davis, we have an open public item towards the end of our agenda. If the item they wish to speak to the board on is not agendized, I would suggest they make their comments at that time.
Excellent. Thank you. We will be ready and have a good lunch, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 20 minutes, everyone. And thanks to the panel again.
Welcome back, Board of Governors. I'm going to call the roll call for board members. Amy Costa.
Present.
Hildegard B. Aguinaldo. Present. Darius W. Anderson. Joshua N. Elizondo.
Present.
Tom Epstein.
Here.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo.
Aye.
Jolina Grande.
Present.
Kevin Hall. Jennifer Perry.
Present.
Lieutenant Governor Kunalakis. Present. Bill Rawlings.
Present.
Roy Shabasian.
Here.
Valerie Shaw.
Here.
Joseph Williams. Vice President Costa, quorum is established.
Thanks, Christina. Welcome back, everyone. We are back on our action calendar, and we're going to start with item 4.5, as was previewed, the budget and legislative request for 23-24. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Executive Vice Chancellor Navarrete and Vice Chancellor O'Brien.
Good afternoon, board members. David O'Brien, Vice Chancellor for Government Relations. It's a pleasure to see you all. I will be tag teaming this item with Dr. Navarrete, as Vice President Costa mentioned, who will be virtual, so it'll be a lot like the experience a lot of our students get in hybrid instruction. We're pleased to present the budget and legislative request for fiscal year 2023-24 to you. Yes, it's kind of weird to be thinking about those years, but that is how far in advance we have to plan. And it dovetails very nicely with the presentation we just heard on enrollment and equitable persistence and student success, as a lot of the items we're going to be discussing in here and asking you to approve are intended to further those goals. So we'll try and move a little bit quickly, recognizing the need to get back on time. If we can go to the next slide. I'll start us off with a little bit of the framework and context behind the request. I'll turn it over to Dr. Navarrete to go into detail about the specific items within the budget request, and then close us out with the legislative component of it, with just a few key areas that we want to focus on, and then next steps. Next slide, please. And next slide again, please. Let's just move right to the context here. So the context behind the 2023-24 request, board members, as you've likely heard by now, is that overall, we're not expecting, based on the projections that we're hearing from Department of Finance, Legislative Analyst's Office, other entities at the federal level, Federal Reserve and others, we're overall not expecting to have nearly as flush of government revenues next year as we did this year. We had a record surplus this year, and we had record investments in our system and our students, both at the state and federal level, as Dr. has highlighted in the previous presentation. But this year overall, we feel it would be prudent, and we've already seen signs of this from the governor and others, to really leverage and implement prior year investments and focus on ensuring that everything, the recent and historic investments we've got in our system is implemented with fidelity and appropriately. So what you'll see in here is this request overall does generally limit the number of new programs and initiatives that we're looking for districts or for the state to implement. Not to say that there are no new ones, but remember that last year we had a budget surplus of around $97 billion and a record number of new programs and initiatives in the California community colleges the last few years. This considers economic uncertainties, right? So we're hearing signs of the Federal Reserve continues to hike interest rates. It's becoming increasingly likely almost by the week that there may be an economic recession looming on the horizon. And so within that, in addition to the need for some fiscal prudence and considering those uncertainties and focusing on implementation of recent initiatives, we're also looking at the changing landscape of higher education, right? And our CEOs who spoke in the previous presentation spoke a lot about this, a lot about recognizing the need to meet students where they are and the role that higher education plays in continuing that move towards equitable recovery. Centering students, which is what we try to do with every single budget request more than ever when we're looking towards the possible uncertainty and possible recession, as well as something new this year that we feel strongly aligns with the roadmap for the future that the governor and the legislature enacted this year, which is this idea of a multi-year budget framework. And what do we mean by that? I think you'll see some details in that as well as in the written item that was posted with the item, the written attachment that was posted with the item for your consideration. But what the multi-year structure is essentially aligned to this idea of the roadmap that we're not just looking at funding individual budget programs, initiative, or requests 1 year at a time, but considering them over a multi-year period of how we get to those 2026 goals, right? And ultimately to the goal that the governor and the legislature have set for the state of 70% of all California adults having some sort of higher education attainment, either a certificate or degree by 2030. So next slide, we'll just talk a little bit about the process. So as we have done in prior years for several years in a row now, it was an iterative process and a process that was very collaborative involving multiple stakeholders. We began earlier this year before the legislature and the governor had even completed the 2022-23 budget. Dr. Navarrete and I and our teams here at the Chancellor's office were already soliciting submissions from stakeholders and partners, both our Chancellor's office colleagues, our partners who serve on consultation council, as well as other critical stakeholders that we've worked with throughout the state in our districts and colleges. Our preliminary review took place over the summer and really involved doing our best to align the submissions we'd received or consider where they looked in the context of the roadmap, which by then had been adopted by the legislature as part of the budget, as well as the Board of Governors' priorities. And those items that were discussed on our most recent strategy session. We worked with our consultation council to conduct a preliminary evaluation of this. And I really want to thank the members of consultation council for the time that they spent, the consideration that they gave to this. Their feedback is very critical to this process. And then now we're here at more or less the final stage. Obviously, after when the board takes action today, all of this needs to be packaged and submitted formally to the Department of Finance. But the final stage from our perspective is that the Board of Governors considers the proposal and provides direction around priorities, including, the reason this is an action item is that as we do every year, we ask for the board's formal approval and adoption of the full request. I'm going to turn it over on the next slide to Dr. Navarrete to go through the priority areas and then take us into the actual budget request items.
Good afternoon, Vice President Costa, members of the Board of Governors. Thank you again for all of your efforts and for considering this important request, and to all of our partners that provided key submissions and our partners in the legislature and governor who have inspired the framework for the 23-24 system request priorities. For this year, we really are structuring around the 5 areas within this that align with the vision for success, as well as a roadmap: reducing time in units to degrees, closing statewide equity gaps, improving educational outcomes, supporting intersegmental collaboration and data sharing, and importantly, also establishing clear pathways to transfer and career. So the various submissions that you see before you and the areas that we are proposing for your consideration are structured in these areas. We want to ensure that any action that we're taking, any investment, and the leveraging of new resources is being considered in the context of these areas so that we can advance the goals that we've committed to Californians. Next slide, please. And so let me get into some of those areas. As you saw in the submission, the name, framework, and aspiration for the 23-24 system request is strengthening the future of our students and California. Next slide, please. And so in the first area of investment, we're seeking resources to reduce time and access units to degree. And so this is comprised as a $23 million one-time request for incentives for colleges to strategize around reducing excess units to degree. Next slide, let me share a little bit more of what this would look like. To provide incentive awards to colleges that conduct analyses of structures that may be leading to excess units to degrees, to adopting bold goals to reduce excess units and to improve time to degree. You heard in the prior panel that valuing students' time, it was shared by President Fierro so boldly, that valuing students' time is critical, especially now as they're choosing opportunity costs, that value and confidence in education. This proposal is really designed to address that. It would also support colleges in implementing strategies to ensure students have access to holistic services and streamlined supports, such as guidance, improved pathways, and interventions so that we can support students along the way and not lose them at any point or juncture in education. Next slide, please. In the area of closing statewide equity gaps, we have several requests that are proposed for consideration. A notable one has extensive support. We're excited to really begin addressing this key area and gap within our services and supports is around students with dependent children. $150 million one-time request with $8 million ongoing to support expansion of both the services, the space, and the partnerships that can ensure that students have daycare support or educational support on campuses. It's also an opportunity to engage future generations of college students. On our work and to advance DEIA, it's important that we also consider the long-term improvements that we can make. And so there's a request for advancing accessibility and universal design, $60 million ongoing, $20 million one time. And within our system, we have foster and kinship care support that provides a local match. The federal resources have been reducing over time. And so we're really looking for a $2 million ongoing investment to continue to support these programs, draw down those federal match, but ensure that we can have the supports needed in California to connect more parents and families of foster youth. Next slide, please. Let me share a little bit more about the Students with Dependent Children proposal. This would really be with the goal of expanding drop-in daycare services, really recognizing that as our colleges are evolving, we really want to make sure that our colleges are adaptable to working learners, working parents in particular. So this would expand services for afternoon and evening and weekend, as you heard, as colleges are really looking to provide services at those times, and removing barriers wherever possible. Next slide, please. Around improving educational outcome, I want to highlight a few. Supporting financial aid connections, ensuring that students know how to navigate that process, that they can draw down the resources. You heard in also the enrollment report that affordability continues to be top of mind for students. We want to do everything possible so that colleges are structured in a way that they can support students for every step of the way in maximizing all financial aid available to them, particularly understanding where there are students that are not accessing these supports. Supporting implementation of equitable placement continues to be a priority. And we see this as an ongoing investment that provides access to tutoring, other course supports, co-requisite courses, structured supports. All of these key pieces ensure that we can provide those educational outcomes. A 50 million ongoing request for robust faculty supports, including professional development and cultural competency. Support for districts to encourage their continued transformation and adapting to students, especially in an era where the higher education landscape is changing, with the 400 million ongoing base and per student rate increases under the student-centered funding formula. And last but not least, we want to understand what is working and what's not working, various innovations in the online learning space, identify what we can gain from current strategies and where there are additional supports needed. So we're proposing a 231,000 one time for a study to analyze the landscape across our system and nationally. Next slide, please. Around intersegmental collaboration and data sharing, really the focus here on data, technology capacity to support the future of teaching and learning. We're seeking continued support around technology advancements with $30 million to support colleges as they adapt to new modalities and the various technology resources that are needed to equip the classroom in the support services that students need and rely on. And lastly, in this area, a streamlined reporting process is a pilot that has started with 9 colleges that we're learning from. And this effort is really ready to go to scale. So the request is for 200,000 ongoing and 2.2 million one time to help minimize the number of reports, but instead improve the quality, the usability, and the connection to the vision goals that colleges are structuring in their local vision goals as well. And so that we can use that to understand where investments are really leveraging results. Next slide, please. And then in the final area of focus, we're looking at how do we establish clear pathways to transfer and career. I want to thank our partners at the Academic Senate for their work in these areas. And one proposal that would really leverage their work across our partnerships with UC and CSU, 2.7 million one time to identify the 20 most popular degrees and transfer majors and help align them at a curricular and classroom level to degrees at the UC and CSU. The second component of this request would be providing strategies for effective advising and communication with students so that they know how to navigate those transition points. Next slide, please. We have additional requests that are related to non-98 resources and one-time funds, continued efforts to minimize our backlog and deferred maintenance with 150 million one-time request. And we are very excited and appreciate this board for the work that they've led around affordable student housing. I want to thank the members that serve on the Affordable Student Housing Task Force. As we've seen the demand for affordable student housing and its connection to the social determinants of success has never been more important. And so 900 million non-98 request to support programs and support projects that are ready to move to construction. We believe that we'll see many advance to this stage, and we want to be able to support them in moving to construction. Next slide, please. And Vice Chancellor O'Brien talked about multi-year investments. In our commitments around the vision for success and the roadmap to the future, we really have laid the foundation for many years and where we want to be by the time we're in 2026, 2030 and beyond. And in order to do that, we thought it was important to start socializing some concepts that we want to propose in future years, start building data, building partnerships to advance these proposals in future years. So this next few items are ones that are not a monetary request for 23, 24, but instead ones that we would advance in 24, 25, or other years. Again, building that coalition of support, socializing the concepts, and ensuring that the data is available to make the solid case for these areas. So let's go to the next slide, please. And these multi-year requests, one of them is around supporting California's diverse teacher workforce. With the 10 million ongoing request, this really would entail partnerships with our TK to 12 colleagues, partner organizations. We want to do that work now, build that foundation, ensure that we as community colleges can be a provider of a diverse teacher workforce and can be an effective partner as well, getting more diverse students to enter the teaching field, one that needs us and is an essential career. The Common Enterprise Resource Planning is something known as the Common ERP. You'll often hear us talk about the need and why that's so important. You also know that as a complex system and a vast system, we have many technology platforms and resources that are utilized by our colleges, but they're often not connected. And that means that we have delays in information, no access to real-time data. This would change that. It's a substantial investment, but one that would be worthwhile. It would take time. So we want to build the steps to propose this in a phased approach in a way that supports our districts, both in the transition and in the long-term adoption. And lastly, modernizing our accountability platforms, notably one that we utilize for strong workforce, K-12 strong workforce, and various Perkins grants around NOVA, modernizing that so that we can continue to support those partnerships with the 900,000 requests. Next slide, let me share what happens next. We present this to you. We begin finalizing based on details feedback provided by the board through late September and October. And then we really turn to our partners to begin our engagement and advocacy, build that data that supports our requests, that provides that evidence and socializes these items. And then we wait for the governor's system or state budget proposal that comes around January 10th. And our budget cycle begins. So throughout all of these processes, our goal is to engage you, support our partners, and work on a unified message and voice for our system. With that presents the portion of our system budget request. I'll turn it back to Vice Chancellor O'Brien to share what our priorities are for the legislative cycle 2023.
Dr. Navarrete, yes, as Dr. Navarrete mentioned, most of the policy work around change and advancing the goals of the roadmap will likely occur through budget investments. But our legislative focus areas reflect critical areas around student success that we feel can be met through policy bills in the legislature. And so we have 4 that we want to highlight for you here today. Also want to note that we will be bringing either at the next Board of Governors meeting or the following one, a revised set, as we do every year, of our legislative principles to sort of guide the specific positions we take or the framework through which we evaluate legislation that's introduced. These are about legislative areas that we want the Chancellor's office to lead. And so on the next slide, highlight the first 2. The Cal Grant Equity Framework, as we've discussed and noted, was a major win for our system and our students. And I can't thank our student leaders enough for all of their advocacy around really finally enacting equitable access to the Cal Grant program. But as is so often the case in the work that we do, the work is not done yet. We need to continue to advocate for full implementation, which is scheduled actually in academic year 2024-25, depending on available revenues in the budget at that time. So that will continue to be a core component of our advocacy, and we'll be monitoring legislation that others introduce as well to make sure that it is aligned with the Cal Grant Equity Framework. Second one I want to highlight here has to do with student members of the Board of Governors and ensuring that student members can focus on both their studies and their service to the board, their public service, and not have to worry as much about that third obligation, which all too often is part-time work or multiple jobs. There's precedent for this, board members. Several years ago, the state enacted legislation ensuring that student members of the California Student Aid Commission, which oversees financial aid in California, are appropriately compensated and don't have to worry about the cost of tuition being a financial barrier to them in their service on the commission. As it relates to the Board of Governors, we know that the cost of tuition at our colleges is not the main cost our students face. It's the total cost of attendance, those non-tuition costs like textbooks, housing, transportation, food, and so forth. And so the proposal here is to basically say that student members of the Board of Governors will automatically be eligible for a financial aid program that we currently have called the Student Success and Completion Grant, which maxes out at $4,000 per term. So essentially, this is a way of ensuring that they're compensated for their service and don't have to focus as much on working part-time at various jobs during the school year. It's called financial aid because that's how it's administered by the state, but it's basically taking place in lieu of a stipend is the proposal. Next slide, please. Two more proposals. You heard Chancellor Gonzalez mention, and we're very, very happy about the governor signing and the enactment of Senate Bill 1141 by Senator Monique Limon. That was our main sponsor piece of legislation this year, and we're very excited about the win for students. What the bill does is it enables students to count more of their full-time credit coursework towards AB 540 status when they transfer to a UC or CSU. However, one key provision of the bill that had been in there originally that was amended out had to do with the number of years a student has to have to qualify for AB 540 status. And without getting too deep in the weeds and talking everyone's ears off here, right, we have a situation right now where a student, in order to get AB 540 status and be exempted from paying non-resident tuition when they transfer to a four-year university, a community college student has to have a combined 3 years of prior education at community college or high school, which is generally fine for students who come directly from high school. Students who are in that adult learner category that are making up an increasing proportion of our students, and remember that 40% or so of our students are age 25 or older, that means that those students have to take 3 years at community college and then transfer and hopefully get AB 540 status, when our goal all along has been for students to get out in 2 years. And so our proposal for next year is essentially to finish the work that we started with SB 1141 and provide that a Dreamer student who has, once they hit 60 units or earn their ADT, which is another statewide goal of ours, they're automatically eligible for the AB 540 non-resident tuition exemption when they transfer. And then finally, the last legislative focus area I want to highlight has to do with our workforce education programs, the main one of which is EWD, Economic and Workforce Development Program. As many programs do in state government, that has a sunset, which means that the statute expires every certain number of years. And the idea behind sunsetting legislation is you're supposed to reevaluate it every number of years and ensure that it's still meeting the needs in its original intent. But the main components of the EWD statute have been updated since roughly the 1990s, when we know that there have been major changes to the California workforce, to technological innovation since then. And so the proposal, and we don't have specific language at this moment, but the board approving it as part of this item will allow us to go forward and develop that language, would be to modernize the Economic and Workforce Development Program to meet the needs of the 21st century workforce and our Workforce and Economic Development Division around things like entrepreneurship and equity. So that concludes the legislative portion and the item. And I think Dr. Navarrete and I are happy to take any questions for board members.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call on my colleague again, Board Member Aguinaldo, to direct traffic there in room for any board comments. Then we'll move here virtually, and then we'll open it up for public comment.
We have 3 comments here, Vice President Costa. We have one from Shabazia and one from Member Elizondo and one from Member Anderson. And one from Tom Epstein. No member, Tom Epstein. Please go ahead.
Oh, no. Great to see the item in here about, I think we called it the California's diverse teacher workforce, addressing a teacher workforce crisis. Seems like that's a very needed investment, ongoing investment in preparing our students who will go on to be teachers in public schools at every level, including the TK through 12, but also it mentioned early care and education, transitional kindergarten, and other educational workforce needs. And then sort of paired with that, also great to see the item for support with students with dependent children. And just going back to the previous presentation from the RP group, highlighted of the 3 takeaways, one of them was on the needs of students with dependent children and just dealing with the childcare aspect. So it's great to see those, and there's some potential synergy there as we're training workforce to go out and to be maybe early childcare providers, to have training in centers. And we know we have districts in the state that do that in centers in the district where they have people able to get some work experience there. So there's some great synergy there. Glad to see both of those. My ask would be that we add some advocacy, maybe this is at the federal level, for funding like early Head Start that helps to ensure that the kids have everything they need from the beginning of their lives, so that ultimately they are transferring to university and getting a degree.
Member Elizondo?
Thank you for your report today. There's many different things in there that I would like to touch on, but the one in particular that stood out to me, which I've spoken to the Chancellor's office about before, is the insufficient cost of attendance for student board members. I just really want to thank you for working on this and finding a way for future board members to be able to really put their service in and not have to worry about the cost of attendance. So I do have 2 questions that came up since I last talked to the Chancellor's office about this. The first one was, does this take place instead of per diem, or is per diem on top of receiving the grant?
It would be in addition to.
Board Member Elizondo, we're having a difficult time hearing you virtually. So can you just speak up just a tiny bit? Thanks.
Okay, so I will speak loud. Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then the second one was for students who already take 15 units, who are achieving that educational goal for themselves. Many of our board members have received this on their own merits. What happens in that situation where a student is already receiving this grant, and then would they be not awarded again this additional compensation for being the student board member? I just want to ensure that it's equitable for student members who are already receiving this through their own personal financial assistance, that they also see some sort of compensation that doesn't necessarily overlap and you lose out on that.
That's a very good point. We will have to look into that. I think we hadn't yet gotten to that level of detail, but I appreciate that question and the point on that. As it is, the Student Success and Completion Grant is currently only between, I believe, 80 and 100,000 of our 1.8 million students receive the award. So it's relatively, compared to other financial aid programs, relatively underutilized. But it could very well be the case that there would be student board members already receiving it who would therefore see no benefit from this. So we will look into that and see if there are ways that we can tweak that proposal to ensure that that situation doesn't happen.
Okay, thank you, because I know Yulia, the career member, was receiving that, and I used to receive that prior to my service on the board. So I'm sure other members or high achievers will may likely receiving this.
Member Anderson?
Quick question on those, on the issues that you highlighted. How will you go about selecting authors?
I mean, typically we look at authors who have expressed an interest in issues before, or if it's something where there's a certain region of the state, or they, that it's relevant to that they represent, or maybe they've chaired or currently chair a committee that's relevant. I mean, there's not necessarily one process we use. It's a very good question, but it sort of depends on the issue. For instance, I can say confidently that in the case of the AB 540 legislation, our first call will likely be to Senator Limon again, because she was such a great champion of it this year. So we want to give her, sort of first right of refusal, so to speak. And if it happened that she already had a full bill package, in that case, we would look for authors who've been similar champions, for Dreamer students. But it just sort of depends on the issue.
And the governor.
Thank you. I just want to recognize all the hard work of staff in moving forward a great package of bills that you all helped to shape, to champion, and to support. And that it's just been a great pleasure for our team to work with you. And I also just want to recognize Ben Cheetah from the governor's office is here as well. I think people know I sit on all three of the boards of public higher education, so I get a pretty privileged window into seeing the work of the various institutions and the way more and more all three bodies of public higher education in the state are working together. And that takes staff working together as well. So thank you all for your hard work, and let's keep going. There's definitely more work to do, but the members of the legislature, including the authors and co-authors of these bills and those that you mentioned, are developing an expertise in a whole variety of ways to make our system, which now serves about 2.5 million students across three institutions, even more accessible and affordable. And as we heard this morning, sometimes it's just a matter of outreach and making sure that students across our state, whatever their own orientation toward public higher ed is, that we reach them and they know what their options really are in this state. So thank you and good job.
You Member Epstein.
Thanks. This is for Executive Vice Chancellor Navarrete. I want to start by saying I hope I'm not losing my mind, but when I read the agenda, I don't know, a week or so ago, there was stuff in that are not in this PowerPoint. Is that correct? And did something change in the link between then and now? Or
I can address that. So a couple of in the slide deck, we didn't go into the same depth as the narrative goes into in the interest of time. We also made a correction on a couple of key items, and so you'll see that there. We did that when we remediated the document as well. So the unapproved draft that is up is the one that we are speaking to, and that reflects this slide deck.
okay, yeah. So okay, good. But there were a few items in there that I really. First of all, I think the budget looks great, and Godspeed in getting it approved by Mr. Cheetah and others going through the process. But you talked about in the prior version that there was extra money for distance learning. Is that still part of this this budget? It just wasn't highlighted here. Is that correct?
There are two, that's correct. There are two that are really support distance learning. One is a study that would really help us identify some of the innovations that we've gained so that we can look at national models as well as California centered innovations. The other is around technology supports for classroom learning, and that's at a 30 million ongoing request as well.
Okay. And then also it was mentioned in that other one about CCC apply being improved. Is that still part of the plan?
CCC apply is actually part of the current year, the current already approved and enacted budget. There are resources that were provided, and that is something that our office is kicking off work and strategy, and there will be a participatory governance work group that begins and rolls up their sleeve to modernize that platform in the coming months.
That's great. And in the other version, there were talks about the zero textbook program, credit for prior learning, And are they still part of our proposal?
Yeah, those are also still part of their resources in the 22-23 budget. So we are currently implementing some resources to, for example, around competency-based education. The Chancellor's office is working on a funding model based on the pilots, the 8 pilots that currently exist. So that's funded work right now that is under implementation.
Thank you.
Back to you, Vice President Costa, for the virtual comments from board members.
Great, thanks. I see Board Member Rollins.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to build on a little bit of what Member Shabazian had mentioned earlier about the supports for our students, especially those that need family care supports, and the teacher prep pipeline. And that I think is just one example I see throughout this this proposal is a lot of kind of synchronicity maybe between some of these programs. I really see where we have different proposals being put forward, different ideas, different funding, but that I see a future convergence between them and how they support one another. So I think there's a lot of alignment here, which I'm really glad to see. One question I do have is particularly regarding the online survey, the effectiveness of online learning. That is a piece that we have some data on already. And we do need to do this deeper dive on it. I wonder if at a future point, or maybe it's part of this one, if we're looking at the wide variety of online modalities. So we have not just purely online, but hybrid. We've got the flex style of learning as well for the classrooms. I think there's a lot of really interesting, innovative ideas coming out, and maybe it's too early for us to look at data on those, but it would be really interesting to see that data at least a future point. So kind of put a pin on that for the staff. And then I also wanted to comment on the common ERP. One of the points I make when I talk to groups dealing with common ERP is how important it is to align with the initiatives that are already underway. For example, cradle to career data system, those kind of things. The administration has put some really incredible investments in a wide variety of these things that we're talking about here in this proposal. And I just want to make sure that we're checking in with those processes. I'm sure we are, but making sure we're checking in with those processes to make sure we stay aligned with what the administration is trying to achieve.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Rawlings. You hit the nail on the head when it comes to one of the long-term reasons that the common ERP will be so fundamental for our system, is that if we want to be effective partners as part of the cradle to career strategy for the state, provide effective data, then that will be fundamental. So more to come on that as we begin the work to propose that and propose a phase-in approach.
Great, thank you. I see Board Member Shaw.
All right, thank you. Vice Chancellor Navarrete, good to see you. I have a question for you regarding the new budget request. The former panelists mentioned the importance of establishing a sense of community. She talked about learning villages, the importance of Umoja. And I know, just as speaking to a lot of our African-American students, Black students, or even, API, who in some campuses are in such a small minority, that sense of community is so important. So what of the requests do you think really focus on developing a sense of community on our campuses?
Thank you, Board Member Shaw. I want to point out a couple of core areas, but also emphasize one of the fundamental points that we made in this request, is that we don't want to look at this request in isolation, and also think about the prior year investments. So thinking about the investments that were included in community colleges in 21-22, 22-23, a historic budget, and always building on those so that we have a holistic experience for our students. One of those is the higher per student funding rate that was provided to colleges this year and is proposed in the request for 23-24. Ultimately, our students on our campuses, when they come and have that caring campus, or they really come with multiple identities that intersect, and leveraging all resources to support students at every step of the way and every identity that they have is so critical. And so we really want to encourage colleges to leverage all of those great resources where possible to adapt to students' intersectionality. So that's one. We also see the importance in here of reducing time to completion in degrees and equitable placement as ones that really focus on classroom and the academic experience of our students, which is so key. That support services help, but we also need to make sure that we have an effective academic experience for our students where their learning is supported, they build confidence in their academics. So those are ones that I'd highlight. In the presentation that you'll hear from Vice Chancellor Ron O'Shaughnessy, you'll hear a little bit more about the social determinants of success and how this concept can play out of bringing resources to support the full student experience.
Thank you.
Great. I don't see any other virtual comments. I just want to add on with everyone else. Excellent work, each of you. I'm particularly excited about the excess degree proposal. I think it aligns quite well with what we heard from the panelists today about increasing the perception of value for our students. I think for so many of them, you know, they are caught between a rock and a hard place, literally, which is working or going to school. And so to the degree that we can make it more efficient and give them only the courses they want, which I do think is a hyper-local issue, I think we can really help there. And of course, I'm a big fan of the student housing, so would love to see that continue. With that, let's go. Yes?
Vice President Costa, we have one more comment from Board Member Anderson.
All right, sounds good.
Just a quick question on funding also, you know, when we looked at the survey and the results of the survey, mental health was one of the key factors, as well as, you know, I found fascinating the issue of confidence and the fact that, you know, people felt that. And so I wonder, you know, what are we doing for mental health, as well as what are we doing for learning disabilities in incremental funding in that particular area?
There are several, I want to highlight some investments in the 22-23 budget that are really supporting mental health expansion. And then some of what you heard also from our campus colleagues, campus leaders, is that they want the ability to adapt to their students. So you see core areas of requests that allow that local adaptability and build on, you know, the investments that we saw in this year's mental health request with additional per student funding that can augment those supports and services. Around learning disabilities, I think the work that would occur should this move forward and the universal design really can also is really intended at getting at some of those innovations and structural changes that we need to make for our students with disabilities or the deaf, hard of hearing, and need other innovations in teaching and learning to support their academics.
Thank you. With that, let's move on to public comment, please.
The public comment period for item 4.5 is now open. We will start with public remarks in Sacramento, then move on to virtual comments. For virtual attendees, please utilize the raise hand feature. If you're calling in, press *9. You'll have exactly 2 minutes. I will hand it over to Board Liaison Christina Castro for any public comments in Sacramento.
Thank you. We have a few public comments on this item. First, I'd like to bring up Wendy Brill Winecoop, followed by Larry Galicio.
Good afternoon, Vice President Costa, Chancellor Gonzalez, and Lieutenant Governor, and members of the board. I'm Wendy Bro-Weinkoop, the president of FAC. On behalf of FAC and all our members, want to thank you for the inclusion of additional faculty resources in the budget and legislative request. 70 million ongoing for embedded tutors and the implementation of equitable placement, and 50 million ongoing for robust faculty support for faculty hiring, part-time parity, curriculum development, and office hours, as well as EEO best practices, are critical investments to support faculty as they serve our students. We've been vocal of our concern that faculty are continually being asked to do more with less, and we believe this budget request is a major step in the right direction to providing our members with sufficient resources to serve students. We also support the proposed investments in childcare on our campuses. Our students struggle with work-life balance and funding childcare will help support students with dependent children. Finally, we'd like to give a big thank you to Chancellor Gonzalez, who met with our board recently where we discussed many of these issues and more. We appreciate the time she spent with our board and look forward to partnering together to support our students. Thank you.
Vice President Costa, Lieutenant Governor Kunalakis, Dr. Gonzalez, members, and I would like to start there as well. Dr. Gonzalez, thank you for coming and meeting with the CEO board, you and Executive Vice Chancellor Navarrete, and it means a lot to have that interchange. And I want to note that Dr. Navarrete has this wonderful tiara effect in her virtual background, which is very it works very well. So to advance the vision for success and to effectively structure the roadmap for the future, the CEOs and the trustees that I get to work for would identify the following in the budget. The increase to the funding rate of $400 million is strongly supported because, as you heard, we have an incredible diversity. So to the extent unallocated resources so that local decision makers can respond to the needs of the students in the different parts of the state is number one. And very close to that is the pension buy down. As you know, districts right now have to divert funds that could be used to serve students and communities to pay down the outstanding pension. So whatever we can do there. The $10 million, although not a lot of money, but supporting the financial aid office capacity is really important as we do better for Cal Grant and other ways. It's really those offices are under financed. And then the 30 million ongoing for tech capacity, although inadequate, is really important. Cyber attacks and holding districts ransom continues. So and want to thank Vice Chancellor O'Brien and Dr. Navarrete for a really unenviable task to try to get all this together in one document.
Our final commenter is Jenny May.
All right. Good afternoon, Vice President Costa, Chancellor Gonzalez, Lieutenant Governor Kunalakis, and members of the Board of Governors. I'm Jenny May, President of the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. On behalf of the ASCCC, thank you for considering our system budget request for an intersegmental transfer success collaborative, which will further support the intent of AB 928 and AB 1111 in clarifying and streamlining transfer pathways and expanding on the work of the ASCCC Transfer Alignment Project started in 2019. This funding will bring intersegmental faculty together to re-examine and refine transfer pathways that truly meet the needs of the students in California higher education. In addition, just like Wendy and Larry before me, I would like to thank Chancellor Gonzalez along with Executive Vice Chancellors Alvarado, Navarrete, and heads for joining the ASCCC at our mid-September Executive Committee breakfast. We appreciated their time and dedication to build relationships as we collaborate to improve educational opportunities and services for students. Thank you.
There are no further public comment in person.
We do have several hands raised virtually. First is Megan Kaplinski. You have control of your mic and can address the board.
Hello, how's this sound?
Good.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you to all involved for considering the ongoing funding in this budget cycle for the part of the budget for supporting California diverse teacher workforce. My name is Megan Kaplinski. I'm a community college education professor at Long Beach City College and department head, instructing those on the teacher pathway. And I'm also the vice president of a professional organization of community college teacher education programs called ACTEC. Not only is there a critical workforce shortage of diverse educators, but there's critically a missing component in the structure of this pipeline. And that missing piece is the institutionalization support of community college teacher education programs. When I left the K-12 system and started teaching community college over a decade ago, it was clear that we needed not only resources, not only funding, but core technical assistance from other institutions and leadership. The initial creation of my program at Long Beach City College relied on temporary grants, such as Education Futures, which provided some seed money to start our program.